I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To have a roll call, please.
Jason Tron.
Here.
Julie Simpson.
Here.
Jeff Bard. Robin Cleek.
Here.
Wes Poland. Here. Matt Jacobs.
Here.
Sonali Patel.
Here. 6 present, 1 absent. Actually, he'll be on the phone, so.
Hello.
Hi, Jeff.
Hello, can you hear us? Okay.
Okay, the meeting is on.
We may want to make sure your microphone's on.
Oh, sorry. Now it is.
Does anybody from the public wishes to comment? Going once, twice, gone. Presentations. We have the kindergarten design team building presentation.
Okay.
Hey, my friends, can you please join us on the rug?
Kindergarten is kindergarten.
Applesauce. Can you show me what whole body listening looks like, please? Thank you. We have a very special story to read to you about a very special school. This story is called The Big Plan by Hawthorn Kindergarten. Once upon a time, there was a school district called Hawthorn. It started as a small 4-room school with only 30 kids. It grew and it grew and it grew. Why? Well, because people from all over the world wanted to come to Hawthorn to learn together. It seemed like everybody wanted to be at Hawthorn.
Hawthorn got very, very crowded. So they decided to call some friends to see if they could help solve the problem. They called the park district, the library, and the village. Those are called community partners. They all decided to make a big plan. That's called the Educational Facilities Master Plan. Since kindergarten is the most important grade, they decided to start the plan with a special place just for kindergartners. They got teachers, principals, a board member, and hired their favorite illustrators to create a new, awesome school. They're called the DLR Group. They became known as Team Kindergarten.
Team Kindergarten took lots of field trips to see what the other awesome schools looked like. They watched movies of schools around the world. They listened to the Hawthorn kindergarten teachers to find out what they thought would be best for a school full of kindergartners. Team Kindergarten dreamed big. They built model schools with blocks. They drew their ideas on paper, and they talked all about what they wanted for kids. It was hard work. They learned big words like collaboration, compromise, and fiscal responsibility, and they did a lot of problem solving. The illustrators, we call them architects, helped Team Kindergarten see their ideas in many different ways. All through the long, hot summer, just like Winnie the Pooh, they thunk, and they thunk, and they thunk.
Then school started, and it reminded Team Kindergarten how much kids grow from the fall to the spring. They realized flexibility was really important. That means they needed lots of different options inside the new school. So the illustrators took all those ideas, especially the ones about flexibility, and drew the bestest, funnest school ever. Team Kindergarten is so excited to have a place where kids will learn, grow, imagine, and create together. Who's ready to see the day? Hip, hip, hooray! And on that note, I guess what we as kindergarten teachers want you to know about Team Kindergarten is that this was a long, hard, fun process. It took many hours. It took lots of work and compromise, as you saw. We really thought about what was best for kindergartners, and I hope you see that in the plan. Do you want to add anything? Yeah. So on that, okay, friends, thank you so much for being such good listeners.
Well, certainly of all the presentations that I get to do, none of them start like this. So we thought that we would take a similar journey as the kindergarten teachers just took us through and talk in greater specificity about some of the things that have happened along the way. So obviously getting started, plan parameters and objectives. You know, this began, as you all recall, with the educational facility master plan, and the program included 18 classrooms, a multi-purpose room, an administrative suite, shared PE facilities with the Park District at the Sullivan Center, of course, and access to the branch library that's just to the north of the site. Thinking all the way back, Winnie the Pooh, thunk and thunk and thunk, right? We went back to June 6, 2016 to the educational master facility plan session where we had a 4-hour workshop with teachers, and we asked them about what a day in the life might look like some point in the future for them. And we utilized this as contextual information for the conversation as we began. So we have a short video that shares one of those outcomes from that session.
Okay, so we have a day in the life of an elementary student in 2026. And we kind of picture like an innovative learning space, like a learning commons in the center of the building. And we also said outdoor, a lot of outdoor space where there's like learning of the outside and inside space, and we see glass walls between the outdoor and indoor space. With a school garden that's student-led, lots of playground equipment and swings. And then when you come inside, like the innovative learning space in the learning commons area, it's a flexible space, and the center of it would be like a presentation area where they would share projects. And outside of that,
Tell us about the day. What's happening in the day?
oh, in the day. So we see kids getting off an electric bus, and then coming to eat their healthy, organic, locally grown at school breakfast. Non-GMO. And then they're getting their day with like a homeroom based on student choice or interest.
It's tied back a little bit to the idea of like multiple intelligence through flow, that it's not need-based, but more so interest, so that they be musically inclined, that that's where they choose to start their day, that becomes their homeroom or their home-based kind of area. It could be an outdoor, flexible based on the student's passion.
And then we saw kind of more like an open day plan, not like a set schedule from 9 to 3, where the day began with a whole group problem presented or a PBL project introduced that had kind of like a service learning component that would be globally shared, globally connected. And then we talked about in the middle of the day having like a student lounge area where they could go for like lunch and choice time or go outside in recess. And then during that like 9 to 3 o'clock time, we pictured a lot of small group collaboration and flexible learning spaces here, time for sharing and touching base and getting input from peers and teachers, and then also push-in time from the support teachers to differentiate during that time.
We talked about also having the ability to have differences in schedules, so some students don't really respond to a need for structure, that could be structured and set for them. Students that, were more flexibly based, it would allow for both types of schedules, depending on the student's need. and that we envisioned something like kind of after hours, the school is like community center space where families are invited and different projects are pursued, different education pieces, but that it's more of a hall and gathering center for families in the evening.
A round of applause for this table. So I hope that you heard words like collaboration and innovation and flexibility and spaces for students to spend time socially and those sorts of things. And one of the things that we took to heart as Team Kindergarten was creating that sort of environment for them such that they could be not only successful in a traditional model, but also grow into other models as time progresses. And so we didn't want to provide a building that was in any way an obstacle to those sorts of opportunities. The guidelines when we began were these. You can see them listed on screen. Space should be as flexible as possible for future needs, discussion versus traditional construction versus prefab. We did that as well. Design the building in a manner for future additions, both up and out. We did that as well. The class sizes smaller than 25:1, created as many classrooms, and we extrapolated that to be learning environments as possible. Don't let the wetlands be a concern. Dedicated space for small group instruction, we've certainly satisfied that as well, as you'll see, and sufficient outdoor play areas. Early on, we did some tours. Obviously, the Sullivan Center had been through a similar process for their early learning and added an addition on just recently. And so we were able to tour that facility. There was a representative on the team from the Sullivan Center, a teacher, who helped along the way. You can see some of the interior images of those spaces. If you haven't had a chance to go visit that building, I certainly encourage you to do so. You can see the photographs on the bottom are of the classrooms themselves, so you can see accent colors of orange and purple, carpet on the floors, those kinds of things. We also toured a few other facilities that were constructed recently. This is one, the Barrington Early Learning Center. You can see a typical classroom here. We took away several things from this about the height of the windows being more younger children friendly, so they were lower to the floor, places to sit and kind of hide away, if you will, curl up with a book, those kinds of things, but a lot of flexibility in those spaces as well. You can see some support spaces here. They had toileting available in the classrooms, for example. They had casework with low sinks for the students to utilize in the space, smartboard technology or interactive whiteboard technology as well. We also toured Washington School, which is in your neighboring district in Mundelein. This was a small addition that was added on to the end of the building. What was unique about this was its prefabricated construction. So this was portable classrooms that were clad in brick. You can see this construction photo. And the base of the building was clad in a brick, and then it is siding above. It's completed today. So we looked through that. That was a wood frame construction option. Some of the comments that we heard related to the construction itself and how the acoustics might transfer from space to space. They liked the individual temperature control of each individual classroom, but there were questions about longevity of the systems since it was a more portable type of construction. There are many varieties of these sorts of things available today. However, they limit the flexibility of the space in the sense that they are classrooms on either side of a hallway, more of a traditional model of how you would design a school. You can see an interior picture at the top of their classroom space. It's basically a square with some furniture, carpeting in the floors, carpeting in the hallways, which is down here. So you can see this is the hallway that subdivides the classrooms on either side. And these are those mechanical units that are outside on the wall. We also toured Ann Reed Early Childhood Center as a part of the master plan process, and I thought it would be important to bring this to bear as well. You can see similar ideas in the child height windows and those sorts of places for someone to sit on the floor. You know, my observation of our earliest learners are that they spend a lot of time on the floor. We have rugs for them. They enjoy being on the floor just as much as they do being on the furniture. So from there, we went into some early conceptualization And we spent time working with blocks. So these colored foam cubes were sized to be approximately 900 square feet each. That was our unit of measure. And then we gave a color to a space type. So you can see in the lower right-hand corner how the different spaces would come together. And these were some of the iterations that the design team worked through. So how the building might perform, how the spatial adjacencies might work. You can see pull-out space being prominent in this scheme as an example, and how the classroom spaces are clustered in this example here. So we spent a lot of time working on those opportunities in scale on-site. In fact, this one here connected the library to the north with a long hallway. So we talked about connectivity and easing access to those books. And from there, we took it into the computer and we conceptualized what became known as the flower. If you look at it in plan form, it kind of resembles a flower with the center and then the petals going around it. And the nickname of petals stuck as we moved through and talked about how these spaces might work together. And we also studied something a little bit more traditional with a twist called the keystones. And so you can see how their shape works and how spaces work. One thing that we noted when we did these was there was 50% more space devoted to circulation than to academic space. So if we looked at the eventual schematic design proposal tonight, you'll see half of the amount of hallways as you do in this design. Well, what does that really mean? Well, that affords more educational space for your teachers and students to utilize, and transition time. If any of you have neighbors, friends, perhaps youngsters of your own, I know I do, and my 6-year-old doesn't walk very fast. And so getting down long hallways can be a time-intensive activity. I think I can see a whole bunch of heads nodding for the kindergarten teachers in the room. So hallway space doesn't add a lot of value, whereas the pull-out space and the academic space adds tremendous academic value. We started with the metrics that you already had, because in our exploration in the master plan, we heard that Aspen were the ideal classrooms for kindergarten. And so based on the enrollment at the time, these are December 16 numbers, you can see that the average class size at Aspen was about 19, and their classrooms are about 867 square feet. So when we do the math on that, the square footage per student comes out to be 46 square feet per student. This is the factor that we utilized in designing the spaces today. So the spatial diversity, as you'll see, the opportunities to transition from space to suit the task, is afforded through the same metric of square footage, just distributed in a different way. So the flower became the scheme of choice, and we continued to ideate on what it might do and how it might perform and how the spaces could work together. And we looked at three-dimensionally what it might look like early on. And then we took it additionally further to see, and we've already talked a little bit about how you can transition from traditional instruction to a future-based model. But this was an early hardline version of the petal. And so you can see how the classrooms work, and then some intermediate spaces for small group work and for pull-out, as well as a STEAM maker space was added as functional space. The theory here is that as the walls are able to transition, the students can as well. So they can move from space to space as the activity warrants, and have access to the physical resources that they need, as well as the acoustical resources that they need, such that you don't have to have a kitchen in every classroom. There's a place for dramatic play in the building. You don't have to have multiple things in every classroom to support the instruction. You can merely utilize the space as it was designed. Jill Martin helped us put together a future look at how this building could be perhaps in several years' time, and how a student might arrive at school and transition, putting away their backpacks and then going into a morning meeting in their day beginning. So you can see some steps that were talked through, because when you have a building such as this, you have to be able to schedule it in a manner that makes sense. And so this was a way for us to stretch and say, how might we schedule this in the future versus a traditional schedule as it might exist in the near term. We took those plans and we brought them into reality. And so the schematic design proposal that you're seeing tonight looks like this. And you have received packets electronically that account for all of this data. But we'll go through a few noteworthy things. So this is the existing Sullivan Center. As it sits today, this white box is the new gymnasium addition, which will be shared space for your facility. It's located on the northeast side of the building. The wetlands is currently about here and goes underneath the building. So one of your original guidelines was, let's not let the wetlands be a barrier. This is a 2-story building with the potential for a third pedal to be added, a 2-story pedal to be added in this dashed orange box location. And we mentioned early on some of the program parameters from the master plan, and you'll see them at the top of this page as well. So 18 classrooms, a multipurpose room and admin suite, the shared gymnasium, and then the library access just off this parking lot on the edge of the slide. This design maximizes value by not only providing those classroom spaces, an art space, and an active dramatic play space, but also includes 4 maker spaces, pull-out rooms, 8 small group instruction spaces, a sensory room, the multipurpose room, and the administrative suite. So by decreasing the ineffective square footage, we can increase the available square footage for pull-out and other activities. You can also see a listing of the square footages by floor and space, and then the opportunity to add 8 more classrooms, 2 more maker spaces, 2 more pull-out rooms, and 4 small group instructional spaces inside of this dashed area here on site. It's theorized that conversations with the Park District will allow school district use of this blue area, as well as a few spaces here for parking and other means. We're also working through site access with the village at this time. Going into the schematic design floor plans themselves, the building organizes itself east-west. So you'll note that the existing building, I'll go back, is oriented to be parallel to how Aspen curves. Okay, well, one of the benefits of orienting the building in an east-west fashion means that we can control natural light much better, that the solar shading complexities of a building that's not oriented to the compass north, if you will, is much more of a challenge. So we wanted to maximize natural light in the classrooms and control it in a manner that would afford multiple activities happening. If we would have mirrored this angle and located the addition, let's say this way, we would have had a difficult time controlling that light. So now as we go back, you'll see the organization of each one of the pedals. So pedal in blue, first floor, the multipurpose room, and then the main connection of the building, the entry sequence is here with a connection to the new gymnasium here. The administrative suite is in red. Now this is also your ICC 500 storm shelter. So current code mandates that you construct a storm shelter capable of withstanding a tornado for the entire population of the building. So that would occur in this structure here on the first floor. So these walls will be structurally significant. They will be, well, they're planned anyway right now to be precast concrete instead of concrete block, but we do have that as a choice as well. And so we're working as the cost estimate continues to be updated with each passing phase. We'll continually monitor the market costs that will help us drive the decisions of what that will be structured because we do have choices. The multipurpose room is in yellow. So this is a common central space, sort of the heart of the building, if you will. You heard the social spaces, those sorts of things, right off of the pedal. Now you can see the proximity of these things together and how close they are. We talked about transition time and reducing that. And then on the second floor, you can see 2 more pedals on either side of a play space in the middle with a workroom at the top. Getting a little bit closer in, you'll see how those operable partitions work. We have a couple different kinds of operable partitions, and we'll see those 3-dimensionally in just a little bit. But you would enter into this STEAM makerspace. There's multiple activities that can be taken in here, but we've also included a presentation space, a reading stair or a presentation stair, as well as the opportunity for portable technology. There's wet space and a sink in here, and project storage was important to this space. There are 4 classrooms, 1, 2, 3, 4, plus the STEAM space, so 5 classroom spaces within 1 pedal. 2 small group spaces, and a dedicated pull-out space for things like special education and whatnot, although that could certainly occur in any one of the small group spaces. When we put a little color to the floor plan, you can see how things start to work and how the classrooms work with those small group spaces again. Limited amounts of circulation, but we've even made the circulation as purposeful as we can, providing reading nooks in these 2 locations on either side of the center classroom, such that there's a space for students to go and have a little bit of individual time, but still be a part of the greater whole. Second floor, similar. I should actually go back. On the first floor, this purple space, we haven't spoken about this yet. This purple space is the art studio. It is accessible from the multipurpose room, such that if there was an after-school activity, you could have something going on in the multipurpose room and still have art being preserved. A part of the original Educational Facility Master Plan program was to have some of these things either in a classroom space or perhaps even in a multipurpose space when you consider. So having this as a dedicated educational space preserves after-school activities in the multipurpose room without disrupting any of the student projects that are happening in the studio space. There's also a sensory room on the first floor with external access. There are several opportunities with partners, including the Sullivan Center themselves, to have access to this sensory space. So having a secure entry from the north, key card access would afford that should any partners want to utilize that during the day or after. Upstairs, this purple space is the active play space. So I mentioned earlier about not replicating resources of kitchens and those sorts of things in the individual classrooms to afford additional space for them to utilize in the classroom space. The active play space is that dramatic play area. It's an opportunity for students to come out of the classroom pedal itself, where there's a little bit of acoustic separation so they can have a little bit of fun and they can afford themselves the opportunity to do that play. On the second floor above the sensory room is a staff collaboration space. So professional development and ongoing opportunities to meet multiple levels was an important factor. Just a little bit of an idea of furnishing. So you can see some images in the upper left-hand corner of opportunities to furnish. Now, the district has some furniture that can be brought over to this facility. For example, these stools here you'll see in several of your buildings today. I understand there's stock for those to bring to the building, so you won't have to necessarily purchase all new furniture. As well as mobile and fixed casework solutions. So the cubbies are located in the individual classrooms in these units. So this is an off-the-shelf unit with sliding marker boards and project storage above or other storage above. What we've done is we've created a unit that has cubbies below and marker boards that slide up and down. So you can have your cubbies hidden behind usable marker board space inside the classroom. Again, reducing transition time at the end of the day for students not having to go into the hallway and put their things on. They'll have access to those things in the classroom space. Less likelihood that they'll lose something along the way when they're taking it from the classroom to their backpack.
That doesn't happen.
I was going to say, my kids have never lost anything.
The exterior of the building was an opportunity to fit into a larger architectural context. We have many different styles of architecture within a stone's throw of this area. We have the residential across Aspen. We have Victory adjacent behind the library. We have the library in close proximity, as well as the Sullivan Center, which we're attaching to. So some of the images that I just described in the various places and the materials are all pictured on screen. So you can see a wide variety. What's on the existing Sullivan Center is a split face block. So you can see this rough textured unit, which is approximately the same size as a brick, as well as a dark brown brick. The library has a black brick of a different size, as well as a stone. So you can see the library has a cooler color palette, whereas the Sullivan Center has a warmer color palette. Some of the massing of the library itself is pictured in these two images. This is the banding that exists on the Sullivan Center today, this brown brick band with the light colored split face block. They have gable forms with square windows. The residential across the street is a townhome or row house form, so you see a dark metal and a red brick with limestone banding. So you can see there's a lot of different styles and a lot of different materials in a short a short, small area. So we're going to go through an animation. I think it'll just play. So this is a familiar image from the earlier, but we're going to actually rotate down and see a little bit more of how this all fits together. The existing Sullivan Center entry is here. This is the new gymnasium that was just constructed. And this would be the proposed entry of what we have been nicknaming Bloom Elementary. Obviously, the school hasn't been named yet, but we kept the flower theme going. Now, the area that you see in landscaping over here, Jason, can you pause it for a second? Maybe rewind it just a little bit. Just click back. It should drag us back. Okay, perfect. So since these students will have the unique opportunity of visiting or going to multiple schools in the district, what we've done is we've created planters outside of the building with each one of your school's names written on them, such that they would have a representative tie to every one of the campus facilities that you have, as well as the 7th facility being whatever this school would be named. So you can see it in yellow here just for sort of significance, easy to pick out. Then you'll also see this 4-column archway, similar in form to what's on the existing Sullivan Center. Well, there are 4 petals currently in the building, so there are also additional planters representing each one of the petals as you enter. So the students can utilize this for perhaps gardens or experiments or an opportunity to go outside and access nature, but still be tied quite closely to the other campus facilities. We're going to go up and rotate out, and you'll see the space that's created between the Sullivan Center and this facility would be utilized for play. This is access off of the multipurpose room. But we don't have a physical link on this side intentionally such that you can maintain that courtyard space, but through a fence still maintain security for your students. As we rotate around, you'll see some of the wetlands, and we're envisioning perhaps a wood chip path that goes through the wetlands for just accessibility and access to nature. We're trying to maximize as much green space as we can on this small area of land. And we'll start to see some of the materiality and some of the banding come in from the Sullivan Center as well as the library. There's a warm wood tone on the library, so you'll see that. And then these bands are at the same elevation as the Sullivan Center. As we get around, you'll get to see what that connection looks like. We have punched openings, but these openings are tall. They do go down to student, small level, if you will, 8 inches or so above the floor. You'll get a little bit better view. This is going across the street from the Middle South parent drop-off and pickup. You can see the east side of the Sullivan Center, the west side of the Sullivan Center here, and that entrance, and then we'll go back up. So I think we've struck a nice balance between all of the buildings around. The Park District will be also considering, obviously the aesthetics as well as the functionality of the building as a part of your governmental agreement for shared facilities. We have shown the facility design to them preliminarily and have had some positive reactions, and obviously we have to present to them as well after we present to this board. So now, it's time for you all to have an opportunity to visit the design in a more meaningful way. So we have 2 ways we're going to do this tonight. We have what's called stereo panoramas, and we have sort of a virtual reality video game experience that we'll take you on a tour through. But before we do the virtual reality experience, we want to take you through the stereo panoramas. So if I could have a little bit of help, Jason. Pass those around to the audience. Hello, everyone. What you'll see here on screen, or on your handout, is 3 QR codes representing views from 3 of the spaces inside of the design. I'm going to switch presentation modes and go to Apple TV.
When you use the QR code, you can look at it on your phone, but if you look it through the Google glasses, it makes it a little bit more dynamic for you.
Karen, going to snap a picture. sure of us
Okay.
if he's on or what.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for you guys all to have them up, then I'm, click, click, click,
So what
click.
I'd
I
like
was
you to
kidding.
do,
You
First, Nick.
if
Yeah,
you
I know.
don't already have a QR code scanner on your phone, I'd like you to visit scan.me and download the app. So if you don't have a QR code reader, visit scan.me and download the app. So I'm going to do that with you for those in the audience or those on the board who haven't had a chance, don't have access. So you simply click download app and then you'll be taken to a screen that looks like this. The app on the right that says QR code reader, I'd like you to select either if you're an iPhone user, this App Store icon, or if you're a
Close
Google
one eye
Play
helps.
user, please select this from your store, and it will take you to the download link. So I'm going to do that for my phone. That's the App Store. Simply click open.
Am I going in?
You'll be prompted to download that app. Now, I've already done that. So all I have to do is hit open.
Like which one?
Do the first one.
What?
Yeah.
Then you'll
Which one
scan
is it now?
the QR code. And you'll be taken to the space. And so you can simply hold your phone like this and view around 360 degrees. Or if you have a Google Cardboard, and we have several of these available, you can simply put your smartphone inside and then view them through the goggles. You get an idea of what it's like to be in the space. So if you wanted to do that, there's a little icon on the lower right-hand side down here. This little icon right here takes you to the goggles mode, and then you can insert your phone into the cardboard.
Don't get out of your chair.
Yeah, it's easiest if you stay seated and look around. And there are 3 different places inside of the pedal that you can explore. So you can explore the STEAM makerspace or 2 of the classrooms inside. And there are instructions printed on these papers that were handed out as well. So you can see I'm in one of the classroom spaces and I can rotate 360 degrees. Now, what I'm looking at on this wall here is that cabinet with the cubbies below. So you'll see marker boards below and cabinets above. Those marker boards slide up, and there's 2 of them, such that you could have all marker board, or you could have cabinets exposed or cubbies exposed, depending upon what your needs were. Okay? So you get an idea what those spaces are like. Is anyone having any technical difficulties or
Me.
need any assistance? Robin?
I don't want to share. Thank you.
You can hose it down.
You can what? Oh, it's not that. She's the cleanest person I know. Okay, I've used this.
Compliment.
I've used this before. Usually, it's not giving me like.
Yeah,
it's not it's not picking that up.
connecting to your camera.
Right.
Your iPad.
How do I get back
Thank
to scan
you.
another image?
Is this gonna fit in here? This is huge.
Go hit the home button. Your round
It's
button.
kind of interesting.
There you go.
To see it work.
And then go back to your QR scanner and then scan another.
Okay. Yeah. No, the
I'm
iPad's
gonna be very careful with Wendy's phone.
You're very trusting.
Did it work? Okay, great.
I wouldn't do that.
So to look at another one, simply hit your home button or go back to your home screen, open the app again, and rescan for the other 2. Okay?
No.
See,
I don't know.
I'm still in the 1 space. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go out and go into the STEAM space.
Yeah.
iPad was so much better.
Yeah.
Remember?
I agree with you.
You want the iPad? The iPad was so much better. Better. It's big.
It's big.
Thank you.
That's the one.
I didn't even think of that.
The artwork in some of this, right? You notice the artwork similar to the artwork that was in the book, or the same artwork. When you go through a virtual tour here in a minute, it's
So this will be the STEAM space, STEAM maker space. As soon as it loads. Here we go. To get an idea of what this looks like. It was mentioned early on that there would be 4 things that the students could do: create, imagine, learn, and grow. So each one of the petals would be themed accordingly. We would have an imagine petal, a create petal, a grow petal, and a learn petal. And we would have them as identifiers. So in this space, you can see this is the imagine, and this is that STEAM maker space, and you can see the casework and the various furniture and things like that, project storage behind these marker boards over here. I wonder if I can zoom in. Nope. I can spin around though. And then you can see access into that pull-out space on the side. Okay. So that's the stereo panoramas. Now we have these available for folks in the back of the room if you're interested. And then I believe that they'll be available at the district office for certainly the near term, as well as the instruction sheet. So if the community would like to come in and have access to these, they certainly have that affordance. So we're going to transition. Oh, I need to go back here. Back to there we go. So the next thing we'd like to do is go on a video game style tour of the building. Now, this was also created in true virtual reality, such that if you had the actual HTC goggles, you could walk around in the space as if you were first person walking around in the space. So we will have that available in the district office, perhaps for an appointment. We're working through the technical details of what that is, but you would then be able to walk through the whole petal yourself. For now, Jason's going to take us through just by using arrows, video game style. So this is the STEAM maker space. And there's the presentation reading stair. You can see back here is a little reading nook. So we've got a curtain and perhaps some bean bags and a little light in there for students to go and have a little bit of quiet time, individual time. We've tried to create multiple scales, not only for whole classes, but for small groups and the individual, because we recognize that every individual learner might need that. You'll see certain things like power available from the ceiling through these cord reels, such that if students needed power to work on something like a 3D printer at a table, we could simply lower that power from the ceiling and they could plug in their 3D printer. When they didn't need it, it would retract into the ceiling. We have the project storage. Jason, can you open one of these? So you can see project interactive whiteboard with a short throw projector, so you could play videos and have a projection surface in the space as well. This is where the sink exists. And then, yep, thank you very much. And then access to the classroom immediately to the side exists through this operable partition. So you'll see that move and open. And then you can have full class access to the STEAM makerspace. So this is one of the classrooms, a rug area for soft seating and things like that. A look back. The cubbies are behind the marker boards slide up and the cubbies marker boards. So Jason, if you wouldn't mind opening one of those. So we're maximizing space. As I mentioned earlier, there's a second set of marker boards such that you could have the full panel, all marker boards at any one time, or you could pocket the top or pocket the bottom as you needed. Now let's go into one of the small group spaces. So Jason's going to open that door. And this is a small group space in between two classrooms. So you'll see an opportunity for reading, perhaps a portable interactive whiteboard. Here's another one of the reading nooks with a curtain. Lots of book storage. All of the furniture is designed to be flexible and mobile. Go into the next classroom. One of the things that we heard loud and clear from the teachers on the committee was the fact that you could have wash stations for the students inside the classrooms and not in the toilet rooms themselves, such that you could also afford multiple students washing their hands for other purposes, for class purposes and the like. There's another kind of door that we have as well. This is a sliding barn door with marker boards on both sides, so we can open that as well. And you can have access to another small group space to the side, such that we can create collaboration laterally in multiple directions between any one class, if you so chose. Now, of course, all the classrooms work in isolation as well. You could have all the walls closed, and you could have just classes you do every day currently. But this design affords you the opportunity to transition spaces to the types of resources that you might need at any given time, while providing access to natural light through the glass without having all of the visual distractions. So you can see, Jason, if you wouldn't mind stepping back into that room for me for just a second. You can see that we have a pattern on the glass walls. So there's some transparency, but it's more for natural light. So you'll see this curved pattern. So each one of these curved arcs, you could walk up and see through, but from a distance, it's obscure, and you just allow the light to transition from side to side. Okay, and continue on. Yep, back through the door. And then into the classroom. So similar, this is the fourth classroom. Accessible to the small group area through the sliding marker board. And we can head back out towards the pull-out space off to the side of the steam maker space, which is right to our right. So this is an acoustically separate space, isolated from the classrooms intentionally, such that you could create small group or individual instruction in this small space as well, but not have it necessarily be tied to any of the other classroom spaces. So that was an important distinction between this space and the others. Head back out to the steam space, where we began our tour. And that's the interior of a pedal. Last, but certainly not least, we have to talk about how we're going to actualize this should the board approve. So Tom is here from LAMP, as Ian Lamp is here as well, to answer any questions and present a little bit of information on both of those topics.
Thank you, Jason. That was a very good presentation. So yeah, after all that, I'm sure you're wondering how much everything's going to cost. Just go ahead and get right into that. For 12 easy payments, this could be yours for. Just kidding. So basically, this is a standard spreadsheet that we started over the last several weeks. We've been working with, once the design got to the point where it's at, we've been working closely with DLR, the district, all the teachers as well, trying to fine tune where the costs are going, trying to figure out how much all this is going to cost. So basically, on the right hand side, up at the top here, this is basically the summary of all the trade packages that we anticipate to see on the project. On the left-hand side, you can see a full breakdown of, 20-some trade packages that we anticipate to have on the job as of right now. All that tallies over to about the 8.9 million mark. At this stage, typically we like to carry about 5% design contingency, and then another 5% for construction contingency as we're moving forward. It's pretty typical at this stage to carry those percentages. As we slowly move through design development, construction documents, the design contingency will start to lower, whether it gets absorbed into the project or if we stay on target and it just becomes a savings at some point. The construction contingency, as a team, will kind of decide when we get closer before construction what the best value is to hold for that place moving in. For any unforeseen conditions, a lot of times poor soil, stuff like that we can't account for right now, that we try to capture here at this point. Moving on down, we start getting some breakdowns with LAMP Incorporated's general conditions, basically project management, supervision, temporary trailers, those sorts of things to start the project. And then project general conditions, which are temporary items such as temporary board up, temporary electric, temporary sanitary, fences, dumpsters, those sorts of items. We just kind of break that down for you so we can see those costs. The winter conditions, we just like to leave that as a placeholder for right now. As the project sits schedule-wise, we don't foresee any, but if things start to get delayed, that could be an issue. coming up. But if we're staying on schedule, we should be fine and not really have any costs required for those items. The pre-construction fees next, and then all that subtotals down to just about 10.3. Following on down, you have the construction manager's fee, general liability insurance for the project to cover, any injuries, anything along the way. It's just a policy that's assigned to the project. The performance bond, that line item will eventually be carried by all the trade packages. Here it is a percentage up front, so it's accounted for early on in the project. Moving on down, we have the architect engineer fees, the civil engineering fees, and then the bottom four here are some owner direct costs, and some of the bigger ones we wanted to break out, keep on the summary pages so you're aware of what they are. The wetland delineation, the cost for basically building on the wetlands. We have to purchase credits elsewhere to make up for what we're taking away here on our project. Sanitary permit review, that's basically for the city, what it's going to cost to hook up to their sanitary sewers, those sorts of items. The FF&E allowance, we worked closely with the district as well as this. They looked back at some old projects, and we felt that was a safe placeholder for what we need to do to put furniture inside your building, all the stuff you saw on the diagram, the walkthroughs, and then other owner direct costs, testing, inspections, builder's risk insurance, those sorts of items, other miscellaneous permits, utility fees, those sorts of things. And all that basically totals up to just over 12.1 million. One item that we're still working through with the district and the city is the road and site access to this building. Right now, we're not carrying anything within the 12.1 million, just because it's such an unknown on what it could be, what it's going to turn out to be, those sorts of things. So we did our best to come up with a general placeholder on what it might cost when we get to that point. Moving on to the schedule. Okay. All right. Well, basically, I thought there was a design schedule involved, but basically right now, DLR worked through their process. The date we want to hit is basically going out to bid early March, for bids to be due early April, and then that'll get us in time for construction starting basically the beginning of June. Right now, this is a very preliminary schedule. This will become more detailed once we know exactly where the project's going. But we've just been allowing about 9 to 10 months on this for right now. And this should definitely be doable for this size of a project.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Just to build on what Tom was sharing about some of the conversations we're having with the partners about access and site work and those kinds of things. We do have a preliminary plan of what would be necessary. We're trying to utilize the existing available resources as best we can, such as the blue area on the site plan where I showed the parking at the Sullivan Center. We're also trying to solidify a partnership with the library for the spaces immediately to the north of the facility, such that you wouldn't have to encumber a phase one of site work, road work. Now, that could always be added at a later date with help from your partners, but there is a means and a methods to facilitate school because of the timing of the facility. We have spent time over at the Sullivan Center at 8 o'clock understanding what the traffic looks like and how many parking spaces are generally used and those sorts of things. And so we feel like there is a way to do it without adding additional road work or paving to the plan, but that conversation is still ongoing, and such you see that allowance being carried at the bottom. A note about the overall cost, the $12.12 million. We're obviously aware of the cap of $12 million. At this preliminary stage with a 10% contingency through design and construction, we feel that this is well within industry standards for this phase of the project to continue forward. Obviously, as more detail is added, more knowns are had, we'll be able to continue to refine these and make material adjustments as well as minor scope adjustments. I mentioned the storm shelter is just one opportunity. If precast comes in, or as we get closer, precast is higher than concrete block, we can start to look at some of those things now. The sooner we make those decisions, the better, because we do have to design all of that information. But we're working closely with LAMP as well as other partners to determine the value of a lot of the individual pieces to make sure that we're on track. So although we are showing technically $121,000 over your $12 million, I'm personally comfortable based on my professional experience with where we're at for the phase that we're in. So with that, that concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to go back and answer questions or go back and review materials. I'm sure that the folks from the kindergarten team who are with us in the audience tonight would be happy to be answer any questions as you have them as well.
It's a great presentation, and one of the things I would say is we are going to have kids not wanting to move out of that building, so that's going to be a problem. Talk about transition. It's going to be a transition for don't want to leave their teachers, as always, but also the building. So I think, and they're going to want to have all their buildings redone to this standard. So, but I don't have any question as yet. Actually, I have a question for Nick. I know we are presenting to the Park District Board, so what is the timeline for presentations to other boards and other, Park District, Village, the approvals we need from them to approvals that we have to get? Do you have a timeline or kind of, a set thing so we know we meet those dates to keep moving forward? So we can backtrack and say if we have to make the presentation to the village by this time, then we can tell them that we need to make, so that we can get the approval. If I don't know what is required, so I'm asking what all is required between now and getting there.
And you can jump in here anytime too. The Park District's tomorrow night, so they get a sense of looking at it. They seem to be generally positive with the design, and they're really interested in the outside portion of the design to see that it aesthetically matches up. There's a whole planning process review with the village that we need to go through. They have they can call that committee together as needed. We're working with the civil engineers to try to start getting that paperwork together and get it in front of them for review. Would probably be doing that in November, possibly near the end of October, depending on our board. We'll come back to our board at the second meeting for any formal recommendations for approval. You're not obviously approving tonight anything, but any questions between now and then, it may adjust the plan in some way. So then we would be taking it to the village for review and that process, and at the same time, we'll be then reaching out to all the places we have to get permitting from. The village doesn't control all the permitting on that, so there are some county permits that we'd need to be going through. I'm working on trying to get the dates for those. The process. There's always a presentation, and then a review phase, and then there's an approval phase after that. So we're working with those. The ROE is aware of our project. After we make the presentation tomorrow, then I'll be forwarding that on to the ROE for their review and start working on that process as well. Did you have anything else?
Just a few add-ons. The village, their purview in this is the site work. They won't be reviewing any of the building or the architecture. It won't go through any sort of aesthetic review or functional review on their part. That falls into the jurisdiction of the Regional Office of Education, the ROE, as Nick mentioned. We do have stormwater to contend with. Gewalt Hamilton is working through that. We have the wetland credits to purchase. Those are somewhat fluid, so as soon as there is confidence in the board later in October that this may be the plan of choice, then I'd recommend that we move forward with solidifying those credits. And then there are reviews for other purposes as well, for sanitary connection and those kinds of things. But that's in general how the process will work.
Yeah, I do have a document that I'll forward to the board on the sort of planning consideration development from the village. And it kind of spells out some of the timing and when you do it. There's a concept review, which would be our first piece that would go through. And then there's a technical review that we would be setting, and you have to have location maps and topographical plats and those types of things. It's a little more technical with them, and that would be the next step. And we'll be going through that. So I'll send this on to the board as well, so you can see what sort of the process is and the plan for that. And then going through the planning and zoning with the board appeals. And so I'll send this to you. The village is sending me sort of a calendar of when they have certain meetings. They didn't confirm that with me today. I had asked them last week. They have not confirmed that. Dave Brown is out, so he's on a vacation day today. So as soon as I get that, I'll send it to you as well. Thanks, but they're willing to work with us, and plenty of time to get them the information so they can get up there.
Do we need a approval from the park district though? And they will need the outside approval, right? Or
Yeah, the Park District has a part of the intergovernmental agreement. The Park District has an approval process as well, and we'll begin that tomorrow night.
okay, and they meet every 2 weeks too? No, they're
Yeah,
once a month.
but
right?
tomorrow's meeting is a special meeting that's set just for us to come and present, so.
Okay,
They'll be working with us on their schedule to make sure we can get it in on time.
okay. Jeff, any questions?
Yeah, what are some areas that present opportunities for reducing costs of the overall project?
What are some areas that present
Opportunities for cost
reductions,
savings.
cost savings?
Cost savings. I think our greatest cost control at this point is in the systems in the building, the mechanical systems and those sorts of things. Right now, the engineers have prepared a supplemental package. I believe that that's been forwarded to the board as well. We're reviewing several alternatives for the systems in the building, the mechanical systems and those sorts of things. That will have probably the largest potential impact on cost should we elect to pick a system that is meets the environmental criteria that you have and the controllability as well as the budget criteria. Beyond that, I would see materials as the next. You saw a lot of different flexible walls in that video. Some of those are more cost advantageous than others, and so we'll be working through those kinds of things. The types of flooring we use, to the types of ceilings that we use, to the how the wall is constructed inside, the drywall, all has an impact on the overall cost. So those are some of the big ones. But right now, the systems are probably our largest mechanism by which we can address the budget with greater specificity.
Would it be short-sighted to address cost savings through the mechanics? Is that just going to cost us more money in the long run?
That's a great question. Operational cost versus first cost definitely have to be considered. We should consider how the building will be utilized in the future as well as today. So, we have made recommendations for 3 or 4 different systems with varying level of controls and sophistication. And so we'll have to make a value judgment on that, not only in the dollar sense, but in the operational sense.
Okay. Before I ask any more questions, the only thing I kind of want to say, I can't really speak on behalf of the board, but I know after the core team did all their work initially presenting the other options that were presented for the EFMP, and the board asked a lot of questions. I think the perception was that we were pulling apart and undoing all the work that they just did. And I just wanted to say for everybody that worked on this team, we appreciate everything. And truly, I know Wes was there on behalf of the board, but for the rest of us, it is a humongous time saver to get it whittled down to this for us. And we appreciate everybody's input. And I especially love the perspective of the kindergarten teachers that'll be using the space. So please do not be offended if I'm asking or we're asking tons of questions. It is our job to, I don't want to say pull this apart, but it is our job to turn over every stone and make sure that we have looked at every aspect of this financially, as far as what it's going to do for student outcomes, as far as what it's going to do for our teachers. It's not trying to pull apart everything that you guys just worked on. It's just what's important to the project moving forward, I think. Okay. Had to say that because I don't want anybody saying that I just bashed everything they just worked on. I do have a lot of questions, but I want to give other people a chance because Jeff already asked one that I was going to ask. So if anybody else has anything, go for it.
Jason, the square footage that you provided in the presentation, actually this slide right here, is that the net or gross square footage?
That's net.
That's net.
Net.
Okay. Do you know what the gross square footage is? Approximately.
Total, including mechanical areas and
Yeah.
everything? 40?
Okay. And then Tom, you had mentioned about the performance bonds, that you put that in as our cost, but then you said something about it would be carried by the trades.
Yeah, basically the performance on when you publicly bid a job, we will ask that it's a bond is required with the bid, and it's basically You can answer a little bit about what the performance bond covers. Basically, that they do the job correctly.
Right, and
Yeah.
that we get,
Right.
we're
So it's a
covered.
percentage that they carry based on the value of their contract.
Okay,
We just, instead of applying it to every single line item right now, we just added it up to the front of the page.
Okay, so will that stay that? Will it go down?
It should. Everybody's bond rate is a little bit different, depending on what rating you have, basically. Some of the larger companies, they have, and it's all against the value of the project, too. So
Okay.
if their bid's 500,000, I forget what the break, I can provide you what the breakdown is, what the percentage goes up, but yes, 0.75% is about the average of what
Okay.
it goes to, yeah.
I have one quick one. You go back to the previous picture of the overhead.
The floor plan?
Uh,
Tell me when to stop.
Right.
This one.
Yes.
Okay.
So how do you envision student drop-off and pickup and bus with that
Well,
parking
we're
lot?
examining a number of options, but our main goal is to separate buses and cars to the greatest extent possible. Speaking from the village perspective, they're really hoping to get traffic off of Atrium Drive to get to the site, and so they're exploring a number of different opportunities to proceed west across the available areas, so like Phillip Road all the way at the top. There's some opportunity, but not necessarily entertainable for Victory. There's an opportunity here as well. We envision and are working through the possibility of staff parking in this lot here. We can bring, there are an anticipated 6 or 7 buses should the district choose to offer busing for the students in this facility. And so buses could, in theory, stage here, or buses could come into the Sullivan Center and stage here. Pickup and drop off. Pickup is not really, pickup is a larger concern than drop off because the Sullivan Center will be in wider utilization in the afternoon than it is in the morning. And so we have to sequence folks in a way that will allow their utilization of the building not to be hampered. So we were also talking about buses using this lot and cars using a different access perhaps from Atrium, as I was just explaining. Right now, the current thinking is that we would utilize existing space as best as we could to facilitate separating the cars as well as staff parking. There is a lot of available parking down, my laser is going to go off the screen, available parking down here by the water park as well that isn't utilized during the school year. That's the opposite of the school year. So we can stage folks there without encumbering the operation of the Sullivan Center itself. Should any of these other affordances from Atrium Drive come into play, that would be an opportunity as well. We've looked at the potential for road work along the backside of Victory, connecting up to Phillip Road. We've looked at connections and expansion of this parking here. We've looked at a road circulating and lining up with the Middle South access road across the way. There have been a myriad of options that have been discussed and are still being ultimately contemplated.
Right now, I'm talking to the Park District. Cars and buses coming in and out of Sullivan Center, there's no cost to that. We just have to stage and time it appropriately. I anticipate the recommendation for the start time for this building would be early, but we'll have to look at all our start times with the middle schools and all, and look at some adjustments. The village would really like us to keep the traffic off of Aspen Drive, if at all possible. But to do that, they have to help facilitate access off of Atrium, and that's what they're working on right at this point, trying to see what are the options there. The other is when we analyze this, when it's all said and done, how many more cars are being brought over? You're bringing 170 students from the north side onto this because all the other students in this building are on the south side. And you're roughly running around 10 to 15% of the students are being dropped off. So if you do 10% of 170 students, you're adding 17 cars through here and a couple of buses, but you're not adding 100 cars through here and 40 buses. Initially, you think it sounds like you're going to be adding a lot, you're putting a building there with hundreds of students, but most of them are already accessing on this side. But the details of the start and the end are
I'm
still.
just, from what I see there seems to be a bottleneck right at the bottom by the blue area there, where if you can have buses and cars, if you say 6 buses, and even if you have, 50 cars coming through there, how are they going to interact and be separated, and how are you going to orchestrate that dance?
And that's the final detail we're trying to figure out. We know we can bring them through. We know the buses can make the radiuses for the turns. We've been looking at that. Like we said, we're working with the library to have staff parking at the top and parent parking down here. And then we're working on the in and out for the drop-offs for buses.
That's still TBD and how to.
Right. And like I said, we're working through the village on several options. We're trying to get some clarification. They've made it clear they would like it to come off Atrium Drive, but they have to help support and facilitate that piece for us right now. And that's what they're working on.
So let's say it does come off of Atrium Drive, which is obviously ideal if your only child enrolled is at the kindergarten center. But as soon as you have to start running shuttle within a 5-10 minute window to Aspen or Elementary South, maybe even Middle South, depending on the spread of your kids, now what? Now you have to go out Atrium and all the way around 60 or back through Deer Path?
That seems to be, they're wanting us in and out off of Atrium. The ideal solution is that when you come in and out onto Atrium, the second is that you're either coming in or going out onto Atrium, not both. And then the third choice is everything's coming in and out of on Aspen. But that is one of those things, and that's where we're going to have to take a look at the timing of all the buildings. Are going to have to look at some adjustments to make sure that we're staging these in a way that a parent can potentially, they're potentially going to three buildings if they're dropping off. So what's the potential of getting them in and out? But yes, right now, if you're going in and out as they're requesting into Atrium, then you're going to have to come back around.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
it's only a problem now, the problem you're bringing up, because we're a campus setting.
Right.
Imagine if we had buildings all over the place in our community. You had a kindergarten building way up north and middle school south, you'd have the same problem.
Well,
Right.
if that were the case, though, if you were a walker for one elementary, there's a good chance you wouldn't also be a walker for the other building. If you're that far apart in proximity, you're probably getting bused to one or the other. So that eases the whole pickup drop-off situation a little bit. This is a problem because if you are a walker for Aspen or South, you're going to be a walker for the Sullivan Center. You know what I mean?
Unless we
Potentially.
decide there's
Again,
not walkers for the Sullivan Center.
in this situation,
That's
Yeah, we haven't
another
decided
cost
that.
increase.
Yes.
I think that there are many challenges to this circulation just because of what you were just asking, Robin, and the potential of multiple drop-offs occurring. And we talked about the ability, would you have time even if you had a bus rider at the Sullivan Center? Would you have time to get them back if you had to drop off somewhere else to ride a bus, if that was a choice? And so it's not easy, and we've had several meetings already with the village trying to share our concerns with any one of the choices, because I think that we all recognize that there could be lots of improvements, but I think that some of the primary concerns, as Nick had just shared, they see Aspen Drive as an issue already, and not adding traffic, although it is a small number of cars who aren't already on Aspen Drive. It's basically your kindergartners who attend one of the 2 elementary schools on your north campus.
Mm-hmm.
That would be added traffic, if you will, to Aspen, because otherwise those
Right.
parents are already on Aspen if they're dropping off.
Right.
So we're trying to work through all of that detail, but that's why it's still to be determined.
Okay. One of the other things I wanted to know is that 46 square feet per child ideal situation. Is there any potential in gaining another full classroom if we were to make that square footage a little smaller without going to the total opposite end of the spectrum where it's just way too undersized? And I'm asking because we said the ideal would be less than 25 to 1. I don't know if it was anything firmly thrown out. I think at times there's been the number 22 thrown out, 21. Doing the 16 classrooms really only gets us down to like 23 and a half students per homeroom. It really doesn't make a humongous difference off the 25. And then I sit there and go, if we're supposed to be planning for future growth, we don't really have an extra classroom here. So if there's ever a bubble kindergarten year, we don't have an extra classroom. So is this something where we, instead of doing a open maker space, we turn it into a classroom? Or is this, I mean, I just think it would be, I don't want to say short-sighted, but, you know, we keep hearing about all this growth coming. So where is this extra classroom going when we get a bubble year? Because otherwise, we're going to turn these homerooms into homerooms of 27 or 28 kindergartners. So how do we get less square foot per child so that we can make another classroom without putting everybody into a really uncomfortable situation?
So lots of layers to your question. Let's start with the 46 square feet per student. So the state, if they were going to fund this building, they would tell you that 45 is the ideal size for a kindergarten classroom, 45 square feet per student. So if we were to reduce that further, we would be going below that state line. Now, state's not funding your building, so you do have control over that, but I would have some reservations about
funding anything.
I would have some reservations about going lower, just from what the resources that the students need. If we look at the trend from the master plan of gross square footage over time per student, if you remember that chart from October 19th last year, you'd see that the trend from 1970 to today has more than doubled the square footage per children because of the types of services that they're being offered, because of the types of instruction that's being developed. So in my opinion, reducing the square footage to fit in another classroom is taking away resources from another student, if you will, because they don't have those same spatial affordances. Now, as far as flexibility of the plan, I think that you do have that flexibility in the studio spaces that exist both first and second floor between the pedals, as well as this is an additional instructional space. Let's get a little closer. This is an additional instructional space as well. So if you think about the number of instructional spaces you have available already, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 outside available already for overflow. Now, I know that Nick was working through some enrollment numbers and questions, so if you want to chat to some of those ideas about growth and flexibility as far as those might go, I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I sent just some quick analysis, and kind of in the kindergarten CASARDA report, and what I sent you a copy of what the Series B and Series C were. And so what we see is that CASARDA predicts for the district to grow, which we're seeing and experience. He did predict over the next couple of years. He didn't define how many of those were, that the kindergarten enrollment would decline off of just the birth rate counts and stuff. And we've noticed that decline. We were at 453, 437. We're now at 412 this year. So there seems to be a pattern that matches that. Now, the numbers aren't matching up with the numbers he'd given there. Our numbers are a little bit lower than what he was predicting. What we've noticed is that our kindergarten, first and second grade, our primary grade enrollments are lower than our 4, 5 on up to 8th grade enrollments. So there seems to be a trend that people move into the district intermediate grades on up. And so those grade levels are 450 or higher, and the primary grades seem to be at the 450 and lower. And somewhere in that report, it said that you might, with the growth, might get into that 450 number in the kindergarten, but he wasn't sure. But his numbers also predicted it could go higher at some point with the Series C, especially. We haven't seen that. If you look at the averages for the last 3 years, it's 430 because we had 453, 437, 412. Look at averages for the last 5, it's 415. And if you look at from 2015, 16, 5 years back, it was 405. So right now, it looks as though for a grade level of 450 in kindergarten, it's probably where we're going to be. I mean, we haven't seen it jump above that. 75 of those students potentially would be in dual language, so you're looking at 375 in this building. There's enough room in here to add 25, making this comfortably gets to 400, gives you an enrollment in the district of up to the 475 mark. And that is a prediction for down the road that he has, but I don't know that off of the patterns we're seeing and the averages we're seeing that The primary grades seem to be lower in enrollment, especially kindergarten. It's sort of one of those you're looking to see, but there are some spaces here available also if you have an amazing large bubble class for the whole district. You have those go up and you have them go down, but this building has space for 25. Has the district that puts the district kindergarten at 475. We're planned it for 450 with some growth. There's I don't know if that's a clear answer, but we're looking at how do we find space and.
So each pedal is designed for 100 students? Is that
112 or 13, and depending upon how that breaks out.
because you've got 4 classrooms, 25, or 26?
Well,
How
and
do you do the
we are
math?
counting, all the available instructional space in the building, so to that 46
Yeah.
level. But depending upon, as Nick was just sharing, with current enrollments and dual language, you would see far fewer students than capacity, coupled with the additional adults available for services and those sorts of things being included in the pedal. There might be up to seven adults in the pedal for that 112 students at any given time. So that effectively reduces the ratio. And then when you consider that some of those students are pulled out for various activities all day long, you might have 18 to 22 in a space and 6 in this space and 4 in this space and so on and so forth. So they're utilizing more area of the building than just one singular space all day long. So it's variable in it, and I imagine that you'd see that in your classrooms today as well as they're receiving other services.
To me, though, it's not just about a space issue. Like, yes, this building may be able to, make it look like, well, there's all this space for all these students and room to grow. But the makers, if what we're trying to do is get the student-teacher ratio down and homeroom size down, the maker space is sort of irrelevant for that. That's not going to reduce homeroom size. It's going to obviously give everybody more wiggle room. But if what we're trying to do is allow the student-teacher ratio to be a little better adjusted for a kindergarten grade level, then designing this for 25 kids per homeroom, I think isn't really hitting the nail on the head for me. I was really hoping to see it designed with like 22-ish per homeroom, 21-ish per homeroom, then with maybe an extra classroom to grow into. I'm definitely a little concerned that this building's kind of making use of all of its capacity when if we're projected to grow, I'm not 100%, Nick, understanding the whole Casarda logic for the decreasing enrollment in the lower elementary grades because I don't know, just knowing my 2 kids' grades, the grade itself didn't massively grow or fluctuate in the later elementary and middle school years. It was, my son's in one of the bubble classes, it was always a bubble class, like it was never not. So I'm sitting there wondering.
Remember, too, that, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but.
No, it's okay. I'm just wondering if the trend is for the birth rates to drop and the trend is for these lower elementary grades to be smaller, then wouldn't that mean the entire district's going to eventually stop growing? I mean, it just.
The migration in and out, we generally will add, going from kindergarten to first grade, that's where we add the most students. And then you see it appear in the upper, or in some of the intermediate grades where people are moving in. And then you see numbers of 12 or 18 difference from when you transition from 4th to 5th or 5th to 6th. You see larger numbers of net migration. Now, any given year, you might have a negative or a positive winning grade, but over a period of time, you see that it's always larger going from kindergarten to first. And then there's some areas that looks as though around 3rd to 4th, and then up in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades where we see people move in to the districts.
Okay.
But I think we're looking at it a little bit differently. So traditionally, we look at it student to teacher ratio. They're all together, all in the same classroom, all the time. So that's kind of where, yes, we'd like a lower ratio, 20-21. So for this type of layout, what percent of the time are they all together versus being pulled out versus, so what's the actually effective student to teacher ratio versus
Yeah, but there's
a
pullouts
no.
now. But the teacher is still responsible for knowing those 25 or 26 students, all of their needs, all of their IEPs, all of their parents, and they're still responsible for all of them. Whether there's 4 or 5 kids pulled out by a service at any one given
Okay, so
time,
it's-
or
so it's
somebody
more
shows up
about
absent, it's
being-
still on the teacher
On the teacher
to
being
know all of
responsible.
those kids at the same in-depth level. And I'm just thinking, perhaps in an ideal world, you'd sit there and go, 15 is the ideal number, and we know we can't get there. But is there an improved outcome for every piece that we can chip away at that? Now, if you tell me evidence shows there's no improved outcome until you get that number down to 15, okay. But I do think that for the sake of everybody's needs still having to be met, especially for those times that they are all together as a classroom, which, at least knowing my own kids, was a decent portion of the day, I still think I would have liked to have seen the homeroom size smaller than it is in this plan.
So if we did smaller homerooms than it is in this plan, they would be smaller than they are today. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I thought that was the ideal going forward, was that if we were going to do something to address the space needs, that we would work on
You're saying square
idealizing the
footage.
classroom size better.
Yeah, I'm saying square footage.
Right.
Well, the square footage,
Right.
the square footage, I get what you're saying now with the 46 square feet is including sort of all of the square footage in the building,
Right.
dividing it up. Right. So now I get that. It's not like literally in the homeroom every 46 square feet. But I just would have liked to have seen that student-teacher ratio brought down. But I'll let other people talk before I move on to some other questions.
One of the things too with this situation, just as an example, that at Elementary South, five classrooms, 25 to 1. If we get 5 kids moving, we're sitting at 26 to 1. We look at, do we add a teacher, or what do we, if we have space? Same time over at another building, we may have Elementary North, where they're sitting at 75 or 80 students for 4 teachers, so you're sitting at 20. When they're in the same building, the growth, some of that growth levels out. Now, the aggregate numbers we're talking about, but there
Right.
are some differences between the buildings right now that occur just by who's showing up in that particular building at that year.
Sure.
And so that helps alleviate some of those situations where we might need to be adding a teacher somewhere else. So if right now we may have added a teacher in one building, where with this type of building, we wouldn't have added a teacher because.
No, I appreciate that, but I think you
Right.
get a class like our current 6th grade class or our current 5th grade class, where district-wide, it's just a big class.
Right.
That's what I'm worried about. I mean, this does not allow for that kind of growth unless we want to go
and
over the 25 to 1, which is even worse than the 25 to
And
1.
all I'm saying is, in the kindergarten, first grade, those numbers weren't those large. They became larger as they went, from what I could tell in looking back at the numbers on some of those.
Okay. That multi-purpose room, is that going to be used as the cafeteria? And if so, where's the hot lunch service and all that stuff?
Great
in there?
question. Yes is the answer. So warm food will be brought over from another facility similar as it is in some of your buildings today, and will be put into a warming kitchen, which exists here, and then served into the multi-purpose room. We recognize that the lunchroom tables won't remain all day long. This room is sized for 2 lunch periods per day. You can, of course, elect to have more if that meets your needs. But the tables would be stored in this location in the corner of the administrative suite. So all of these would be able to be folded up. And then likewise, whatever chair or arrangement that you would have when the cafeteria tables are out would be switching. So you just simply store those while the cafeteria tables are out, and then vice versa when you needed them for other purposes. So you have that duality available to change the furniture settings throughout the day. So food service is certainly contemplated in the multi-purpose room. The Park District does not want food service in their new gymnasium.
No.
Yeah. And as well as other academic activities or after-school programs, all with proximity to the entry to utilize that space.
Okay. Are there any costs that I'm not thinking of that would be associated with the fact that this does not have its own kitchen and would need to have the tables constantly moved in and out?
I think that you're in a situation where you do that all the time. I don't know if that adds any cost. James might be able to, he was here earlier. He had to step out. He might know that better than I would.
Okay.
The one thing I wanted to ask is, we talked about the plan is great. I mean, it's really the security system that we're accessing the Sullivan Center. Our kids are going there. I mean, could you briefly touch on the security system that is there to protect us and our kids from, or anybody else accessing that system at that point?
Okay, so that's a great question. So this is the main entrance, and you'll note the multiple layers of doors that exist. So we want to be able to afford key card access for those who are permitted to be in the building, be they administrators or otherwise. So they would be able to simply do as they do today and swipe to enter. The folks who would be in the main reception area, which is located right here, would have a security camera system and a buzzer ability, not only at this threshold, should you so choose, but also at this threshold, such that you could create a dual buzzer system if you wanted to. The reason
System? Can you show me again? Missed it.
These doors here are the main
Okay.
exterior doors.
Okay.
And then here's another layer of doors at the building line. So
Okay.
we did this intentionally such that if there was access to the gymnasium space, which would be just off screen here, the new gymnasium space, that you could allow after school unfettered access. You could have those unlocked and then get access to the gymnasium. There is an exit that comes out of the existing gymnasium. So of course we're always allowing egress out, but we're just preventing people from coming in an uncontrolled manner. Now you always have the opportunity to lock off the addition through these doors here or these doors here. So you'll have multiple levels of security to control how folks might migrate from one facility to the other at any given time. The only other exterior doors that exist are for exit purposes. So you'll see there are exit stairways on either side of the pedals to facilitate egress from the second floor down and out of the building, as well as egress doors that exist from the multipurpose room towards the west due to the number of potential occupants that you have in that space. You have to provide enough exit inches for the code to get everyone out in a specific time period. That's how those are calculated. And then those doors would be either on a key card system or always locked during the day, similar to how you facilitate some of your buildings now. But the control for the facility would be located through the reception. Now, there are also doors. I mentioned earlier you'll have some partners through the sensory room. So there's an intentional exterior door here with specific key card access as well. The Park District has said that they would like access to the sensory room as a shared space on their request. As well as there's a partner, and I'm forgetting what organization they're from.
Yeah, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Say that again?
Special
SRA.
recreation area.
Okay, thank you. And they are providing the equipment and the outfitting of that space, such that they would also request separate access to that facility. And so we're working through the particulars of what that means. There's a meeting scheduled in the next week or so, if I'm not mistaken, Nick.
Yes, well, I've got one Friday.
Friday this week, to talk through what that means for that space. So we've afforded the space. We've been told that they will outfit the space with equipment and necessary technology, but in return, they would like access to that space. So that's why you see that exterior door there.
Where's the elevator?
Great question. The elevator is this little X
Okay,
right
it's there.
here. So out the multipurpose room. So this stair goes up from the multipurpose room up to the space upstairs, the dramatic play space upstairs. And then the elevator does the same thing. So there's basically a bridge above, which you'll see right here. Now this bridge also provides us with access to the mechanical room where there'll be boilers and those sorts of functional things. The storm shelter here, by law, has to have its own mechanical system. So when Wes was asking about the gross square footage of the building, these sorts of affordances required by code don't apply to the function of the building, but they're necessary to make the building work, such that in any sort of storm situation, the occupants who are sheltering in place in this vicinity are not only protected from the weather event, but they're also supported by a separate mechanical system such that that mechanical system can remain active even if the rest of the building is not active. So there's a specific set of time. We have to store food. We have to store all of these different things. We have to have toilet facilities for these folks, all separate from the rest of the structure. So that's why you'll see some of those other affordances. You'll have multiple what look like staff toilets in the administrative space. Well, those are actually calculated to meet the requirements of the shelter in place.
That area labeled specialists, is that offices for like reading specialists, OTs, like that what that encompasses?
Yes.
Is there any privacy there, or is that?
Great question. So these 3 little rooms here are
Oh.
private phone booths. Should they need to have a private conversation with a parent or otherwise, they have that affordance. And then this is a common workspace. And we envision, they'll be actively involved in each one of the pedals when they're not working at their desks, but they will have that workspace, that privacy afforded through the phone booth.
I guess I meant like privacy when they're working with the student. Like, are there enough pull-out sections
Yes.
for all these students' needs to
And
be?
even multiple conference spaces in this area, should they be meeting with parents or other folks who are outside of the building. When they're meeting with
Okay.
the students and engaged, they might be in this pull-out space that's, as I mentioned, isolated from the other classroom spaces. So they might be in those. There are 4 such spaces in the building for that. So you have layers of collaboration built in for public as well as for school use.
Okay.
Back to Robin's point, is how hard would it be if, for example, we got a really big class to turn one of those maker spaces into a classroom?
Well, it would be easy in essence because you already have the 4 walls of the makerspace created.
Okay.
You would just have the kids housed in that space as their home room, if you will. And then they would still have the same flexible choices to go out to the studio space or to the dramatic play space or otherwise. The only potential downside that I see to housing students in the makerspace is you have to traverse through it to access some of the other spaces. So now in the future-based model of this facility, if we see that collaboration come to life and the spaces being used differently in time, that would be less of an issue.
The contingencies
So,
that, oh, sorry.
I'm just
Go
saying
ahead.
that, could that be a contingent on, if, because right now, we're only looking at 21, 22 kids per classroom, but if for whatever reason we get a huge influx and we want to keep it at that, and we need to turn a makerspace into a classroom, it seems doable. The size is about the same size as the classroom.
Yes.
Is there anything that a classroom has that the makerspace does not, like access to a bathroom or something like that, that would have to be added in order to make that a classroom?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Jason. So the dedicated toilet room that exists in every classroom or shared, there's a Jack and Jill situation as well, which you have today. They would not have that affordance. They would not have an extra toilet for their utilization. They'd have to go into another adjacent space to utilize that. That's a great point. But you also do have the opportunity to convert spaces like these. Now, this might not be the best homeroom classroom, but this could easily be a makerspace in waiting, such that if you had a bubble and you needed to utilize one of the maker spaces, you could have this studio space become a temporary makerspace while that bubble was in the building. And then as it moved through, I don't know how likely it is based on the information at hand from the Casarda report that you would have all 4 makerspaces needed as 4 extra bubble classrooms at one time, whereas you might have 1 at any given year, but the other 3 would be able to be utilized as they were intended. And then you could share amongst all the pedals, right, such that you just change the time parameters of that space's availability. So let's say this one is reserved, but this one is still available and flexible. These teachers could collaborate to utilize this space at a different schedule with these teachers and then convert the studio space for multiple use as well. So you do have the layers, if you will, in the pedal as well as between the pedals on both floors.
So
And there's,
saying with that thought, would you look at designing the makerspace slightly different to accommodate that contingent in terms of access to a bathroom, traffic flow, kind of maybe just slight adjustments so that if we need to make that change, there's less impact?
Yeah, and I could think of a real easy way to do that. So this toilet room here, which is utilized by this one classroom, could easily have another door to the hallway. And then you could access that toilet room from the makerspace by just simply walking down that short distance of the hallway. And you'd solve that accessibility issue.
And it's got, like I said, right off the numbers right now, there's room for 25 more additional students in there before you'd have to move to any
Yeah.
of that. And our numbers, we're expecting growth, but our numbers haven't shown at that grade level to be hitting those high numbers.
Using this year's number, each one of these classrooms would be 21, 22 kids.
No,
So,
it wouldn't. Oh, if you use this year's number, yeah, but if you use the average,
yeah, so,
yeah.
so
Use the
right
average of
now,
23 to 24 kids per homeroom.
Yeah.
Any more questions? We're running at about 8:40, and I'd like, the teachers have been here for a long day, so.
Well, I mean, they don't necessarily have to stay. I mean, they're not going to jump up anyway, but I did have a couple more questions. The contingencies that are built into the budget right now, is there any chance that any of those ever get returned? Am I thinking of it correctly, like a retainer fee would be?
No, whatever's not used out of those contingencies goes straight back.
Does that ever happen, like in real life?
I think so, yeah. Definitely the construction contingency. I mean, the design contingency, it's just, there's so many unknowns right now. You know, we got a lot of detail to work off. We just don't know what else is going to be included or
Right.
come up. But
So
yeah,
if we had like
there's-
change orders, it would come out of that first before it would?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and then that FFE line item,
Mhm.
you mentioned something about furniture. Is that including the furniture, or is that just including the labor to install the furniture?
No, that is the furniture
The
itself.
that's what it stands for, okay.
Yes. FF&E is an acronym for furniture, fixtures, and equipment.
Okay.
I just had a question about that outside play space, because it was kind of hard to like see about how big is that area?
It's a great question. It's quite large, actually.
It doesn't look large, so, it's.
Well, and
look at the gym right next to it.
yeah, it's the size of basically a gym would fit next to it. Now, it's not the same shape as a gym, but a basketball court plus fits in that space.
I'm just trying to think of how many students at a time we're planning on having out there as the.
And we do have, currently where the future addition is outlined, this would also be a great place for play. Now, we've allocated wetland credits to support the construction, but we've also allocated wetland credits to mitigate all of the available wetland areas. So in other words, the $105,000 that's in the budget right now basically says that you can do away with all the wetlands and use the space how you so choose, such that you could add additional play space before that addition was contemplated on the outside of the building as well, and use a localized fence to support that need. Does that make sense? So you have this as a primary choice because it's immediately accessible from the place where students would eat for that recess period. But you also have another opportunity to the east of the building to utilize that space as well as the field space, presuming that this parking isn't needed by the library at some point in the future. We don't anticipate a need for parking for this building itself, such that this greenfield space is also available should the village allow that as a use. Because it's there, this parcel is owned by the village to the north. The property line for the Sullivan Center is about right here where I'm drawing my laser.
So for gym class, for example, they could go out to that,
They could go and use that field.
use that if the village lets us. And Julie just spent your contingent on that extra place.
Well, yeah, I mean, but every time I hear ad, that's exactly what it is. Every time it's ad, it's more money.
Of
Instead of
course.
already being there right now. But no, because, I was just saying, so if we do the plan after recess, because it connects to the multipurpose room, I mean, if you're only planning on 2 periods, that's quite a large amount of students to fit in something that's the size of a gymnasium, kind of.
That would be something the building would eventually work out on how they do that. I don't know, if you had 2 periods, if some went to there and some ate, and then they flip-flopped locations, there's all things. Yeah, so remember, we have access to the gym the entire day.
Or like
there'll be
recess
PE
doesn't
classes in
have
there,
to
but
be
the-
attached to lunch.
I'm sorry?
Recess doesn't have to be attached to
It's
lunch.
just the
Right,
location
no,
of
no,
where
yeah.
the
Well,
space is.
I should qualify too that we size the cafeteria for 2 lunches as the most restrictive, right? You have to have enough physical floor space to seat that many students if you so chose, to give you as much schedule flexibility in the future. But as Nick characterized, the building can choose how it facilitates lunch up to that point. And I just wanted to portray that that's not sized for everybody to sit in there and have lunch at the same time.
Right.
That you could make other choices along the way to see how the day unfolded.
I have a yucky question.
Okay.
Lockdown capabilities. These movable walls are making me a little bit nervous. As soon as you have a movable, flexible wall, much harder to secure each classroom.
Very good point.
Floor to ceiling glass looks pretty, but on the first floor especially, that's bothersome to me a little bit. So knowing we can't avoid all windows, but then there's like no place for anybody to even like, so to speak, hit the deck. What thought is given to any of those concerns, knowing that all of these extra security measures are insanely expensive? Because I know we've looked into some of these before for other spaces.
That's a great question. It is a little yucky, but nevertheless, it's good to be asked. A few things about transparency. We have had several of our buildings with transparency between classrooms analyzed by Homeland Security, as well as local law enforcement. And I can point to a couple different examples if you'd like, and provide some photographs of that as well. But the transparency, given the current considerations of how bad people might facilitate something, is that the transparency is beneficial for law enforcement to have, such that they can clear a room faster. And the old stay and hide under a desk is slowly transitioning. Now, I don't know what your current policy is in this district, but it's fight and flee are becoming more of a standard or a norm among school districts than it is to secure in place. Now, with all of that said, these doors can be pinned at the bottom as well to create a lock, such that you couldn't operate the door from the other side if that door was pinned closed. So you have that flexibility, but we're also afforded the benefit for hopefully never needing it of the transparency and those sorts of things, and still have the benefit of what Homeland Security is calling that ability to clear a room. So I can provide you some additional detail if that would be beneficial. But we have seen very positive feedback in similar situations from law enforcement.
I think the question that comes to mind is, how long would it take? So putting the pin in a door and securing that door is fairly quick. But if that movable wall is open and you want to secure that room to stay in place, how long would it take then to secure that, to close that movable wall then in order to get that secure room?
So those walls are paired panels. In other words, there are two glass panels that are hinged together and slide on a track. So a person of, I'm going to pick on Jill, a person like Jill would probably take a minute and a half or 2 minutes to close that door. So as we know from experience in these sorts of tragedies, time is the most advantageous thing that you can have for law enforcement. We would seek to compartmentalize the building in other ways to slow down someone's progress from the outside in. There's a lot of current thinking and research that speaks to some of those challenges. It's also not a good idea to advertise your security measures in a public meeting. So I'd like to be able to answer those questions in a different format if possible. But note that we are paying close attention to those sorts of concerns.
And the most recent training we received is not to sit and huddle in the classrooms, it's to move out. This situation doesn't provide for long hallways, which is a problem in those situations where there's a long hallway. So people have to make decisions on how they move and when, but it's an unfortunate situation you have to plan for.
So we do have, through the exit stairs on each side of the building, east and west, we have classrooms with direct exit into those stairs. We also have, inside of each one of these partitions is a fixed swing door, such that you could have the door closed and still provide exiting out without having to open the whole thing or close the whole thing. So those sorts of time advantages are available as well. We don't only have to think about the closed position, but to your point, we have to think about that open position and how we can get students out as quickly as possible.
I have a question. Tom, did you base these estimates on your own historical data, or did you use a program like RS Means?
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Okay.
To be honest, when I went through the estimate, put it together. If there was a piece to be counted, we counted it as best we could, sort of thing. And then we collect unit prices from similar jobs like this. We apply those costs, but then other items like I back check with RS Means and those sorts of things as well. For the mechanical systems, just since it's basically a square foot budget, we kind of looked at different schools, different projects that have similar systems like this, looked at kind of the bid averages and where those numbers were coming in at, and apply those costs accordingly to these areas as well.
One thing that we did to aid in the process as well is we've called our manufacturers' representatives to validate budget numbers such that, ceiling tile is a good example where we have a lot of ceiling tile in this building, as much floor area, almost as much floor area as we have ceiling area. And so we wanted to make sure that that budget number is meeting current market conditions as well. So Jason reached out to a representative to make sure that we're in line, and indeed we are based on their historic data to the current market data. So we did those additional checks as well. The playground equipment was talked about. There's a $200,000 line item in there for playground development. The current available information that we have on that is that could be a $60,000 piece of equipment, depending upon the size and complexity, the number of swings, and those sorts of things. So we have afforded for a couple different zones of play. Now, the surface that you put underneath is a big cost question mark. If you do wood chips or rubber, there's a difference in deviation between those two things. Those are the kinds of quality conversations we can have about materiality when budget comes into play. But we have made every foreseeable affordance that we can safely put into these. I don't want to leave you with the impression that we've got a lot of unknowns, because while there are definitely more details to be added as we progress through the process, we've tried to quantify and qualify everything that we possibly can. And not only have we gone through the estimate, but our engineers have gone through the estimate. We've called the representatives, and then they have their historical data as well as their expertise to lean on to come together at something that we feel is a quality estimate.
I only had the one question. Anyone who's walked through Town Line and dual language on an 80-degree day knows how hot it gets when you get up to that third floor. What are we doing to make that second floor energy efficient? Because I'm thinking operational costs as we, another 2-story school is going to drive that.
Well, the spaces will be conditioned for both summer and for winter, so we'll have air conditioning in the building. So we'll be able to maintain an ideal zone. So depending upon the thermal comfort of those in the building and the clothes that they wear, 68 degrees is cold or it's hot,
right?
Just depending upon if you're wearing flip-flops or not. So a lot of unique challenges go into the individual thermal comfort, but we will provide mechanical conditioning, both cooling and heating, for both floors.
Okay.
And it is 2 instead of 3 stories?
Right.
It's a little bit wider, and I think provides, but yeah, the upstairs.
As we go up.
Yeah, as you go up, you can feel the difference in temperature. Yeah.
One thing
I'm always,
too,
yeah.
just an additional point of information, Illinois is one of the most stringent energy codes in the United States, second to only some on our West Coast. So the thermal efficiency of this building will automatically be a great measure over even your most recent construction at Town Line and the thermal properties that were required by code at that time. So it's quite an order of magnitude different.
Right.
Can we get solar panels?
We don't have any solar panels in the budget right now.
We have
The
contingency.
Sullivan Gym, it's got those great skylights that literally light up the entire gym. So, slick, but they're expensive.
Slick costs money.
Anybody else?
What is the classroom square footage compared to the preschool Sullivan Center square footage?
Can you
How do
repeat
you
the question?
compare that to this preschool, Sullivan's preschool square footage? Is that,
That 4 classrooms that were added to the
Yeah.
existing Sullivan Center? I don't know that data off the top of my head to know how big that those are.
Ours are slightly smaller, but they just have a hallway and 4 rooms, and so there's no pullout. And the 46, if you were to look at the 46 square feet per child, it probably turns out to be more than what the Sullivan Center would have. They have some fewer children in the room, but if you were to say that was a kindergarten room, it would probably work out less because of the pull-out spaces and the maker spaces, the things that they don't have. This provides us those spaces that they don't have.
And we can double check that square footage.
Classroom to classroom.
Classroom to classroom size. I think those classrooms, if I remember from when we took, they're something like 900 something, not counting, and ours was like 800 something, right? You said
Correct.
according,
Yeah.
based on that? Because I remember when I took the tour, they said it was something like
Yeah, I think
900
you're right.
something. So,
Yeah.
oh,
We can find that out and get back to you on that, just so you have an exact number.
anybody else?
When it comes to actually picking finishes, and I think you said that was an area where there would be cost savings and whatever, are there going to be, like, how many various options per finish are we going to get, and who gets that level of detail? Is that the board that would have to authorize? Is that Nick and the design? I mean, who is that?
The way that the contract is written, because both BLAMP and DLR Group have some onus in providing costs in keeping with the budget, right? And so at this level, I'm confident that we've done that. When we get to other levels, it's our obligation in the contract to provide minor changes in material or scope of work to afford you an on-budget project. So those are the levers that we can pull. You have the opportunity to say that we need such and so many of that, right, as a baseline. Like, I need to be able to seat so many people in this space. We have the opportunity to say, this is a means to do that and meet your budget.
Okay.
So we'll be providing those sorts of opportunities. Another budget control that we have that's a really important one is alternate bids. And so if you've experienced that on a past construction project, that will give you a choice to either add or deduct any one thing as an alternate, such if the marketability at bid time is different. You know, ultimately, we don't control the bids just like you don't control the bids. But you would have an opportunity to say, oh, we can add that now because the bids came in better than we had hoped they would. Or we might have to change that material to something else because there was a challenge with this bid package. So you have those additional affordances when we get to bid time beyond what's in the estimate.
Okay. And then speaking of bid time, I think the last time we asked this question, the only natural disaster that had hit recently was Harvey. But now the whole world has fallen apart. So how are we expecting that to impact, 6 months from now, the bid process on materials and all that stuff?
Everyone's concerned about gas coming up here tonight. Gas is $2.19 a gallon, so refineries are back pumping away. The comment was about man, material, and drywall. Houston and those areas in the south are already moving already. It's going to be a long, slow process because there's just not enough bodies to go down and repair it all. And you keep saying with the drywall too is you can only put up as much as you've got. So, and in fact, God bless Illinois, one of the highest labor markets too. So if anything else we're going to do is if there's work to be had, I know contractors here to basically advertise in Texas, say you want to make more money, go to Chicago. You might have to survive the winter, but you can make more money. In fact, we knew a lot of people back even in my day when I first starting out in the trades. There was a lot of what we call the movers who came up to work in Illinois from April to October because they could make a much better wage and then go on unemployment back south for the summer months or the winter months. So I don't see it impacting at all from what I see. Yes, I know it was hard and devastated for those in the south with the storms and stuff like that. But there is a labor shortage, yes. But also, yes, they say that Chicago is moving, but the suburbs are lacking work. We've had some other projects we just priced through. In fact, we have a large project we're probably going to break ground. We've been working on it for 4 years. And the budget we gave 2 years ago is holding strong because there's still a lot of contractors in the suburbs just looking for big projects to work on.
Okay.
So I don't see any major. This is as of now.
Right.
We still have another hurricane season to happen, some other stuff, but I guess another good thing about Illinois is we're far enough off the coast that it doesn't really impact us. It hasn't impacted though the refineries shut down, they're back pumping again. So.
Okay, thank you.
Another question. Go back to the overhead picture of the
Site plan?
with the parking lot. Yes. So where the entrance is, to where the cars would be, seems to be blind. In other words, you can have a hard time seeing into that hallway that connects the new kindergarten with the
Here?
yes. So you've got a little coverage out there, but if cars are coming up, I'm imagining a rainy day or a very bad weather day, picking up, dropping, mostly picking up. If people are waiting, they're not going to be able to see that car coming in. Is there any thought about extending that outside coverage to provide some weather protection so that even if it's not enclosed, you can at least walk out maybe to the edge of the building and still see cars coming in, still be somewhat protected?
I have an answer. Do you have the same answer?
We're looking at staging in the gym
Yes.
for
that was my
dismissal,
answer.
Okay.
because you can see it right there. And we've got the gym during the whole time we're open. So we would look at staging the drop-off pickup there.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Right, in this location with immediate proximity.
Yeah.
Because as Nick mentioned, that's an affordance that the Park District has given to the project such that you can utilize this for the duration of the day. So we might as well stage for, if it's a wet morning, just the same. We want those kids to come in here and to clean this space because it is a hard surface space, so you can dry it and clean it quickly, and then they can progress into the building further from that link.
Okay, but here's my question. That gym, if you've been there, and Park District, that's their prime, their pride and joy right now. They're not going to want snow-covered, rainy, booted kids in there, like so many of them when you try to do the staging. And, are they going to be okay as just a permission? I would ask them, even though I know they've allowed us, because that is going to be snow and salt tracking onto their really fine finished floors. They're not going to be happy about that. So
Well, there are
I think
things, magic distance is 14 feet. Don't ask me how, but that's the magic distance of mat that you need to have in order to traverse a lot of that wetness getting onto the floor. And so we'd be able to provide that as a service through James or his team to provide walk-off mats on inclement days to protect their floor. But there are means around that.
Okay, I just want to have plans for that because they will not, I just want to make sure they're aware of what we are planning or,
That's a great question.
or we are aware of what their feelings about something like that are to come up to the last minute and say that. I'm not.
Yeah, and what's interesting when you see this aerial view, things are actually a lot closer than they appear on this. You actually go over to the library parking lot and park, and you look at where the building's going to be. It's really close. So it gives a false sense of a distance that really, once it's made, you'll actually be closer than you might think. But we would be able to put down the walk-off mats and those types of things. That's what we try to do. But it's still worth the investigation to see if you were to bring that coverage out a little further, provide locations for folks to stand and watch on a misty day or something.
Sounds less
It is.
What other stuff is your head filled with?
You don't want to know.
All right.
It's not a very good fun party fact. I throw that out at a party, people walk away.
I found it informative. And you're not partying with the right people.
Totally.
Anybody else?
Which spaces would potentially be usable by agencies outside the school?
Our large group instruction multipurpose room and the sensory room are the two spaces that we would see the Park District or their partner or our partner on the sensory room. Those would be the two spaces that we'd utilize.
Which spaces would be utilized by the outside groups in our building? So it's a multipurpose room and a sensory room, which were the only ones Jason said. Yeah, under negotiation of somebody else using it when we are not.
And that was the reason that we located the sensory room on the north end with close proximity to the library lot, such that those folks could park here and simply utilize that space through key card access, rather than coming through the length of the building, parking at the Sullivan Center, and so on and so forth.
Really impressive presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Jason. We're going to take a 2-minute break while Jason and Tom and Jason clear up. And then we have the next presentation for audit. And Kevin has the floor for our audit report.
Okay, all right, so, as we have in past years, we like to just come out and give you guys a short summary on how the audit went and where things ended up, whether or not there were any suggestions, any kind of comments that we had for you as the board. First, just wanted to start off, audit went well, no significant issues, things went very smooth, especially considering that Brad was actually the one who was here for the entire audit period. Usually you can run into some issues where things can't be found and it's hard to find an answer because you're trying to drill something down that you weren't here for. So on Abe's part, everything went good from that standpoint, and there was no significant issues as far as getting information, timeliness of things, anything like that. So with that, normally we like to go over the management letter that you guys have each year. This year, the only comment you guys had was due to material journal entries. This is something that you guys have gotten for an extended period of time now, and it's not something that's out of the ordinary. A lot of districts this size get this comment. There's just various entries that there's just not enough time in the day to drill everything down and make sure that everything's in there. So part of our purpose of coming in is making sure that stuff is recorded correctly, and we make the necessary entries for that. So that's not really something that's out of the ordinary that you should overly be concerned with. As far as the entries themselves, pretty similar to things that they've been in the past. This is actually an improvement over last year. There was some issues with Title I last year in the grant reporting of expenditures in the correct period. So that's one smooth. We do our grant tests every year where we test certain transactions just to make sure things are running in the way they're supposed to and in conjunction with the reporting requirements. This year's test obviously didn't find any issues with that, so things appear to be moving in the right direction and continuing on well. As far as the audit itself, the report itself shouldn't really look much different from last year's report, other than obviously the numbers. Formatting wise and everything, no new GASBs this year, so nothing new to really go over as in past years where you guys have had GASB 68 and fair market value reporting for certain investments. Those are some big ones in the past couple of years. Nothing real big for that. There is in the future, just so you guys know, a GASB 75 where it's essentially going to be for an OPEB obligation, which is other post-employment benefits, where unfunded liabilities are going to have to be reported in a similar manner that the pension liabilities are reported in. So that's in the future. Again, you guys are cash basis as well, so they're not actually recorded on the financials. It'll all just be footnote disclosures. The last key area I'd like to hit on, which in discussing with Dave, you guys have already gotten the ending fund balance numbers. So total ending fund balance ends up being about $40 million for all the funds, which ends up being about 8 months of you guys' total expense, which is in the range of good where you guys are at. So I don't see any significant issues or any warning signs or anything with that. We also like to usually go over the general fund because that obviously is the main operating fund and the fund that supports most of the district. The ending fund balance in that fund is $27 million, which is about the same number. It's about 7.5 months. So you guys are in the same range. So you guys are good from that. And those you can see all those ending fund balance numbers on page 16 of the report itself. So that's the sort of summary like we normally like to go over. If you guys have any questions, if you've had time to review this, if you got anything specific you'd like to ask. Otherwise, those are the main things we'd like to go over.
Jeff? Hello?
You had enough with the last one, apparently.
We might.
Did he think we were just done?
He's still there.
Okay, he might come back. Anybody else? Any questions? Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you and congratulations.
Yep, thank you.
And you can come to our kindergarten building for the next time.
Check it out.
Yes.
Next time, let him go first. He'll be,
Yes, next time.
Sorry for making you wait.
No problem.
We thought based on this, it might take a little longer.
Thank you so much,
Clean.
Kevin.
Not much here.
Next item for presentation is the Lakeside Transportation Renewal. Abe?
Good evening. The proposal from Lakeside is due on the 11th, which is Wednesday, and so until I receive that, there is nothing new to report as it relates to the renewal. Any questions?
Anybody have anything? Jeff? He said the report is due on the 11th, so there's nothing to report.
Okay.
Okay. Did you have questions for Kevin, by the way?
No.
Okay. Because now Abe could answer them because Kevin left. Superintendent's report on the Aspen Family Partnership Council parent
Yeah, I have Bill Frederick.
on Aspen.
Bill Fredericks here help me. There were some questions that had appeared over the last couple of weeks or so on Aspen Family Family Partnership Council and how that's a
Family Partnership Council.
Thank you. Yes, and it's a vehicle to engage the families, the community at Aspen, and participating in school. And there were some questions about dollars being spent supporting Glasser. So Bill and I have talked, and we were trying to answer some of those questions for folks. So we're going to start off with, just let folks know that since I think it's 2011, no funds have been spent to supporting the Glasser piece. Glasser really is a quality school model in many regards, and it talks about joyful learning experiences and things of that sort. And so it a lot of the qualities that fit within a quality school model fit within our strategic plan. When we went through the reorganization, Townline Aspen were no longer choice schools, and I think some folks have gotten confused a little bit with the choice theory, thinking that was a piece of that. And that's sort of a mechanism, a vehicle that helps Aspen working with their students, and some component, a little bit of behavior management, and others of just the quality school experience using data and the joyful learning experiences. So we wanted to make sure folks know that there aren't dollars involved in investing in that continued support. And one of the things the district's been working on this year, we got a new social emotional learning program that's consistent across. We are looking at a consistent behavior management program right now. SOAR is used at Townline and Elementary South. It's a positive behavior support system, and that is one that through the HPC work is looking for that might be our consistent sort of behavior management that goes across all schools in the future. But until then, schools are working with the models that they have developed, things of that sort. So just didn't know if there were other questions that might come about. And I don't know, Bill, if I missed something on the quality school model that aligns with the strategic plan and is
No, I
something
think I would
which
just clarify one piece of information. In 2010, 2011, which was the first year I was in the district, there was a separate line item in the staff development portion of things that was roughly $5,000 above what other schools were getting for the sole purpose of training staff members in Glasser at that point. So that's the portion that was eliminated starting in the 2011, 2012 school year. That hasn't been in place. We have used at Aspen staff development funds, which are the same that everybody else gets, for a one-day visit from somebody from the Glasser Institute. That has been at an extremely reduced cost to us. It includes any of the staff members who want to participate, so we can have up to 40 staff members for roughly $300. We coordinate with the person who comes out. We have a conversation with the staff to figure out what issues we're currently dealing with that we'd like maybe some support or some ideas with. That person will come out for an afternoon, make observations in the school, and then have a meeting with the staff to kind of address some of those things. So we haven't had that $5,000 piece, but we have spent a couple of $100 every year to have that person come out and work with the staff.
And it's similar to other schools. They have a line item that they might have somebody come work with their staff on
And
something.
that line item, at least in the budget, is based on the number of students and staff that you have in the building. But in 2010, 2011, we had $5,000 extra just for the purpose of training in class.
And that was eliminated subsequently.
Yeah, the 2011, 2012 school year, that line item was gone.
So this is only a one-day training that, whatever the training is, and it's not necessarily, it's just a one-day training that the teachers go through. The rest, that's it, right? That whatever the
Yeah.
PD you might say is just a one day.
Yeah, last year it was about working with students who are demonstrating anxiety in the classroom and how we ease some anxiety for students. And we wouldn't even call it a full day. A couple of hours of observations in the afternoon, and then roughly an hour and a half to 2 hour presentation with a portion of time that was open-ended for questioning at that point, to give real examples of what teachers were experiencing and how you might be able to work with some of those things. But it's a one day, it happens on one day.
So just to make it clear for the community, and I'm hoping I'm characterizing this the right way, Glasser is not a curriculum. Glasser is a discipline model, a behavioral model. Like, what would you classify it as? Since people are worried that this means there's an inconsistent curriculum.
We have to be careful at this point, because Glasser wrote a therapy model that was called choice theory. He took choice theory and applied it to schools and created what he called the quality school model. There are different components to the quality school model. So beyond just behavior, components will include, you have to demonstrate continuous improvement for your students. That includes self-assessment. So students doing self-assessment connects to kind of like our goal setting across the district that we're doing. You have to demonstrate that you can meet basic competency expectations. We talk about those in terms of what used to be the ISAT, now PARC testing, and even MAP testing, Ames Web, some of those universal screeners that we'll look at. One of the components is that you have to build positive relationships, students to students, students to staff, staff to students, staff with each other, school with community. Because at one of the foundations of what Glasser believes is there is no meaningful learning in a school or for anybody at any point without solid relationships, supportive, encouraging relationships. Another component is that school has to be seen as a joyful place for everybody. So there's several different components to what a quality school would be characterized as. Most of those components really connect very nicely with our strategic plan, particularly building strong relationships, being collaborative, and finding school as a joyful place. And then that big goal of 100% of our students will meet their growth targets by 2019. That's though it's not written that way in Glasser, it's about continuous improvement for students regardless of what their proficiency level is on the standards.
So just to be clear, your second graders, everybody are learning the same thing
The curriculum
everybody
is the
else's
same.
second graders are as far as content and standards. It's just gone about a different way as it is in every building.
Aspen teachers participate like everybody else in the development of a guaranteed and viable curriculum using the Understanding by Design framework. In fact, at the Institute Day on Friday, that was a big portion of what we did, meeting as grade levels to review those units and start talking about we have the units in place, we have the standards in place, the essential questions in place. We even have summative assessments, common summative assessments. A big portion of the conversation on Friday was how do we get everybody to be using the same common formative assessments. But Aspen teachers are participating in that. They use the same units, they have the same standards, they're expected to master the same curricular information as every other building in the district.
Any other questions? Jeff?
I put him to sleep.
All right.
You're very soothing.
Thank you, Bill.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you
Bill.
very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night. Next discussion item is the Cuneo Farms Development Building Placement, student placement in
Yes.
the district buildings.
Yes, this is the first presentation of some information to the board on the location, potential location of assigning students from the new Cuneo neighborhood. Using 119 students as their number, we roughly run about 63% of our enrollment is elementary. So that gives us about 75 students. K through 5 is 6 grades, gives us about 13 per grade. And we have roughly about 33% of our students are at middle level, so that's roughly 39 students at the middle level. Looking at all the buildings and potential, the only assumption is that there's a kindergarten building made, and those classes are removed, but no additions to any other buildings, no additions to middle school. 2 buildings open up as potential, Elementary North and Aspen. Elementary North would lose 4 kindergarten classrooms, and Aspen would lose 3 kindergarten classrooms, plus they have a bubble classroom. So they both would end up with 4 available classrooms after the kindergartners move to the new building. It would be, at this point, my recommendation to the board would be to assign the kindergartners to Elementary North. Stays on the north side, may help us a little bit with transportation. We have the 4 available classrooms that opened up. We're looking at roughly 62 students, because kindergarten would be out if there's 75 students total, and 13 per class is a number we're using. You subtract 13 from 75, you roughly have 62 students. It's roughly 3 classrooms worth of students. Now, it never falls where you get 13, 13, 13, and then all falls. But in essence, what happens is you could have a predominant, these homes are higher-end homes. Maybe we don't get young couples. Maybe we get couples a different stage in their life. So you're getting, 3rd, 4th, or 5th graders. But we would have the available space for the students to be added into the grade level and have a classroom space for them. Also then would transition them to Middle School North. I talked to both middle school principals, and they felt the Middle School North would be the best location, have the opportunities. Middle School North does have the ability to access John Powers buildings. There's some classrooms there that we use for storage right now, but if needed. Middle School South does not have the ability. Again, this is planned with no additions or whatever portables. Middle School South does not have the ability to access those. They are pretty full. Also, Middle School North could add the students in with the need to add fewer staff with the many sections they have as compared to Middle School South. So provided this information to you in a brief memo, and give you that information. That at this point the recommendation would be, and it would come at the next meeting for final action on your part if you wanted to do it at that point, but to assign them to Elementary North and migrate into Middle School North, keeping them on the north side. And then the other additions that we know of, Woodland Chase and Melody Farms, we'd assign those probably over to Aspen and utilize some of the space there. But I feel as though that way we'd have a good transition from one to the other. It would keep the whole neighborhood together, which you wanted. We did talk about they potentially could transition from a north side elementary and go to a south side middle, but Middle School South has more space constraints in classrooms and no safety valve like the Middle School North has the classrooms at John Powers if needed that could be accessed out of there. Didn't know if there were questions at this point, or you could send me questions and I'll get them answered before the next board meeting.
Did you say you did send this to us in a memo, or you will?
It was sent in a
It
memo.
was, and I'll send it again.
Why not?
Send it out.
It was sent in a memo.
I've opened everything.
What other options did you consider?
Well, I don't think that Elementary South was going to work because they had they already have so many displaced programs. Once the kindergarten goes out, those rooms will be used immediately for the displaced programs. Town Line, we're pulling 3 classrooms out. They have some displaced program in there that will be moving back in to some of those spaces. But if 60 students is going to roughly be 3 classrooms, It doesn't give us any additional space at Town Line if the numbers worked out like that, where you'd actually have 62 students showing up, and they needed to be distributed across the grade levels. My concern is those 62 students may not distribute across 3 classrooms. They might end up having to be distributed across 4, depending on the age and how they fall. And so a 4-section building gives you a better chance to absorb the students, and the building has 4 additional classrooms available where Town Line would only have 3, and they only have 3 sections, so it doesn't absorb as easily. I didn't calculate in any of the students going to dual language. I just assumed that they would be, I'd get all 62. What's the highest number I think would end up in an elementary building? So I looked at those as options as well, but it quickly came to Aspen and North as the 2 potential, and North having 4 sections and then 4 classrooms has the potential to absorb that growth easily, more easily than Aspen might with the way it would be worked out.
What about consideration accounting for slight adjustments in other boundaries? Did you look at that at all?
I'm not sure if I followed your
Like if
question.
you change an existing neighborhood, I think he's saying.
Oh,
Making room somewhere by adjusting our existing boundaries, right?
Yes, and if we were to make an adjustment to an existing boundary, it looks as though that, Elementary South is the building that might need some adjustment out, move a neighborhood or out of Elementary South. And again, looking at, depending on which one of the neighborhoods would be, putting it in Aspen, kind of keeping the south side on the south side. And so if that were an option in the future for us to consider, the area that needs the most adjustment would be Elementary South, and then I would consider making recommendations to adjusting boundaries there into Aspen, and that's where those 3 classrooms would come in handy down the road. We previously looked at some neighborhoods, and some neighborhoods might match up very well with numbers, where you could move an entire neighborhood over, or potentially split a apartment complex on the south side. We could identify a certain number of those buildings that might be adjusted and moved into Aspen. So I didn't think that moving anybody back into the north side, with this building being on the north side, would be the plan. It would be making an adjustment on the south into Aspen.
So with Middle North, I'm seeing incoming class next year of 250, which is basically 25 more than what is averaging.
Right.
And we're okay. They can absorb that class plus.
Yes,
whatever.
and they with the how the schedules work, they feel that they can absorb those. The other, in talking with them, the middle school dual language program, if it runs as we expect and gets it added, you're actually pulling students out of, assuming your social studies, science, so it reduces so I might have 30 students in a class right now, where next year I might have 20, because depending on where the language kid falls, certain sections would come out and look through that. Did look at their schedules. I didn't bring them with me, but I could try to get those numbers back from them again and show, but it looks as though they could absorb it there. And then, again, the big safety valve between Middle School North and Middle School South is that potential to access John Powers classroom if you needed to for something.
I'm still not finding that memo, but whatever.
Board update, September 25th.
Thank you. I did not actually go that far back. I'm having like a sort of Twilight Zone moment here, because for the last year and a half, I've been under I don't even call it an assumption, it's just what's been said over and over and over again, is that Middle North is over capacity and Middle South has room to grow. So I was totally not expecting the suggestion that we distribute Cuneo to Middle North at all. And I understand that the idea is probably the bulk of the students won't be in middle school, but that's partially just because it only encompasses 3 grades and not 6. So I'm going to have to digest that one for a little bit.
Let me go back and I'll resend.
Totally not picturing where they have space.
I'll resend this and I'll go back to my notes with both Mr. Collins and Mr. Natal and review those and then send those back out to you.
All right.
Send those out to, I don't know if I sent all those notes meeting with them, but I'll find those and send them out and show you how that works.
I mean, are we having gym in another cafeteria that I don't know about?
No.
Are we going to put like orchestra students on each other's shoulders since there's like 91 crammed into a space that holds 40? Like, I mean, where are these people going? I'm not picturing that. Wow. Okay.
I think middle school capacity is an issue that
Right.
had to have, is that was supposed to have been taken care of with the master plan, but we're not doing that, so we have to find other ways to take care of our middle school
Oh,
students.
no, I totally agree.
No, it's like they have to go somewhere.
But if Middle South is not yet at capacity, Middle
Yeah.
North is, I would think if we have to make do right now with what we have, that wouldn't have been the first one I would have picked off the top of my head. And I know it wasn't literally just off the top of your head, but
I'll send the notes out to you again and I'll try to give some more details off of those things for you. And it's the first conversation, so in between, if you think of questions. I did get some information from the village about the amount of homes they expect to close on in spring. I think it was 2018, so I'll look at that, but that'll give you a sense of when it's starting as well. So I'll include that. I just got some information today on that too, so I'll include that in there. So you get a sense of timing of when Cuneo is starting to, when they're going to close, when they start to see, when they expect to see certain homes.
and I'm totally not kidding when I ask this, but I'm going to ask this. Not trying to be funny here. I know the developers already agreed to their impact fees and whatever. Is there any chance out of goodwill they would build the gymnasium or something at Middle North? And if we said we were calling it the Pulte Gymnasium, like, and I'm not kidding.
No, I'll reach out to them and
Anything.
I'm getting desperate.
Yeah.
Like,
Music room, anything, whatever they like, they can pick. We'll name it that.
So as part of that extra information, I think it would help us, since elementary north, the space available seems easy to understand in terms of how it would absorb those classes, but middle north seems a little more complicated in terms of how will it absorb the 30-some kids. So if you can say more about the middle north absorbing that, that would help.
I'll get those more details for you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item was the EFMP. It's 9:40. There is nobody here. Not that they would, I mean, they wouldn't have stayed this late anyway, but are we tabling it?
We can punt it to the next meeting.
Yeah.
Is the next agenda just as big as this agenda was, or you don't know
It
yet?
always will be. I don't know what is there on it right now. I mean, there'll be a couple of action items on it at that point, and I don't know what else comes on, between now
Do we
and
have a
then.
large presentation or no?
Huh?
That we know of, a large presentation that we know of next time?
Joe Perkowski, the board attorney, will come to introduce himself and do a brief presentation, like annually. It's an annual event now. You'll have the kindergarten building revisit if there are questions or adjustments, things. So there'll be probably won't be as long as it was today because you've seen it and you might think of questions in between, and we try to get answers. Those are the two that I know of right now. More information for you on the Cuneo, and then we'll put it as an action item, but if you were comfortable with deciding, you could. But I don't know that there's any other big ticket item on there at this point.
And I would say, go ahead, Wes.
What is Joe gonna give his presentation on?
The board had previously asked, or previous board has asked to have him come present information about the firm, the services they provide, sort of a
Our legal
review.
counsel.
I'm sorry?
Just introduce themselves.
Okay, and so we pay for this?
Obviously.
No.
We pay for it all other, but this is just an introduction because you have to know who he is.
Right. But we're not paying for him to show up on the 23rd.
Okay.
There's a tax levy presentation at the next meeting.
Okay.
It's not going to be huge like today, but it's there.
Short.
We'll just have 10 short presentations.
There will be taxes.
There's a tax, okay. So we are tabling that for the time purposes, not necessarily because of anything else, because it's 9:40 and,
Yeah.
okay. So next item is, that's the end of the committee of the whole meeting. We'll go to the business meeting. Anybody wishes to public comment? Lisa, as a new community member.
That would be hilarious.
Going once, twice, gone. We have the consent agenda, which is the board minutes from September 25th, closed session minutes from September 25th, closed session minutes from September 27th, and a personnel report from Jamie Den. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Matt.
Nope.
No motion.
No. Motion by Wes, seconded by Matt. Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Jason Tron?
How about discussion?
You need any discussion?
I'd like to separate out the September 25th minutes.
You're going to pull the September 25th minutes.
No, just to vote on them separate, since I wasn't at that meeting.
Yeah, that's what I said. We'll just pull them out and we'll vote on them separate. So I make a motion
Wait.
that the Board of Education approve the
Hold
consent.
on.
Sorry.
Yeah, do this right. There's a motion on the table, there's a second. So if Jeff wants to amend it, then we have to amend it, or you can pull that initial motion, and then we can start all over again. Because you can't do another motion with one already on the table and seconded.
So we have to make an amend.
So that's why, okay, so for a consent agenda, let me just speak for a moment. Consent agenda normally does not have discussion. That's why it's called a consent agenda. You consent to these normally things that we normally do, and there's no discussion on it. If we want to make changes to it before, that's where the request should come right before the motion so we don't get into this pickle. So right now, we have a motion as presented and a second. I think what can happen is whoever made the motion can withdraw the motion, and then we're like back at zero. That's my understanding, and then we can then
Okay.
make another motion with that change.
I withdraw the motion.
But he wants to vote on the other stuff.
So Wes withdrew the motion. Now, do I have a new motion without the minutes from the closed session of September 25th? Can somebody make that motion? Or I make the motion that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda items as presented, except for 10/9.31, which is the closed session minutes of September 25th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Jason said second.
Motion by Sonali, seconded by Jason. Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Jason Tron?
Aye.
Julie Simpson?
Aye.
Jeff Bard? Robin Cleek?
Aye.
Wes Pullen, aye. Matt Jacobs?
Aye.
Sonali Patel?
Aye. Motion passes. 7 ayes, 0 nays. Can I get a second motion for the closed session minutes of September 25th?
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes from September 25th, 2017.
Closed session minutes.
Yeah, it's the only minutes from that.
No,
Closed
they're the
sessions.
board. Oh, you said the closed, sorry.
What?
Huh? No, she said the closed session minutes from 25th, sorry. So, motion by Robin, do I have a second, please?
I second.
Motion by Robin, seconded by Wes. Could I have a roll call vote?
Jason Tron?
Aye.
Julie Simpson?
Aye.
Jeff Bard?
Hey,
Robin Cleek?
Aye.
Wes Pullen, aye. Matt Jacobs?
Aye.
Sonali Patel?
Aye. Motion passes 6 ayes, 1 abstention. President's report. The October 14th, which is the Saturday, is the PSAT 8-9 for the students in 8th grade at VHHS. It starts at 8 a.m. You need to be there earlier. Make sure your kids are there. I would like to thank Katie Wagner for Principals Read a Book at the Cook Memorial Library. She had a really full crowd. I happened to be there. And so it's more pressure on the other principals to get their kids in to hear them read. Also, this month is a National Principals Month. So on behalf of the community and the Board of Education, I'd like to thank all our principals and assistant principals for all that they do for us and our students. So thank you very much.
Amen to that.
Superintendent's report.
All right, a couple of highlights for ourselves. Middle School South girls cross country team finished first at the sectionals this past weekend and will be heading to the state meet next weekend. On October 5th, Dual Language had the first all-school second step assembly, which focused on showing empathy. Brittany Eberly, a fourth grade teacher, wrote a theme song that she sang and taught to the students. Dual Language and Townline will have a family roller skating night at Mundelein Skate on Friday, October 27th at 6:30 p.m. Make sure you get your insurance checked for your health. No.
Bring a helmet.
Yeah, bring a helmet.
Elbow and knee pads.
Wrist guards. Those are the ones.
Roller
Yeah.
derby. No, just kidding.
Calling all future Eagles. We have a flyer here to have a current or future student, newborn to 4. They're invited to a special presentation from Cook Memorial Library on October 12th at 6 p.m. at Hawthorn Elementary North. So we're excited about that. Also on October 12th, Middle School North, Middle School South, 7th and 8th grade band festival at Vernon Hills High School, concert at 7:30 p.m. It fills up quickly, so make sure you get tickets. October 13th, Snowflake at Middle School North, Middle School South, 7th and 8th graders and parents. Middle School, 2:15 to 10 p.m., Middle School South. On Saturday, the 14th, PTO 5K Hawthorn Hustle at Century Park. I will be there to say go, but I'm not going to run it. But, I'll start you off. Cheering you on. So, on the 15th, the health deadline required health forms must be on file with the school nurse. Students not in compliance must be excluded from school. So make sure on the 15th, before that date, you get your information. The 16th, trimester 1 midterm reports are distributed. And on the 17th, Middle School North, Middle School High School, Middle School North, and Middle School South Choral Festival, Mundelein High School, 3 to 9 p.m. So we've got a lot of exciting things going on. And again, thank you to all our principals and assistant principals for all their hard work. And thank you to all the parents for their great kids that we have. We're enjoying a good year. And thank you to I didn't get a chance, but the design team that worked really hard on the kindergarten building. We do appreciate all their hard work and their attention to detail, trying to get the best we can for the small space and the dollars we have. That's a pretty interesting fix.
That's it for today.
Illinois Association School Board Lakes Division meeting?
That's Wednesday.
That's Wednesday.
Yes, is everybody attending?
I am.
Okay.
4 of us. Jason, Robin, Wes, and I, along with Nick, are attending.
Save me a spot.
No excuses, Jason.
Okay.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Wait, are we not doing topics for future agendas?
Yes, please, sorry.
This is not a topic for an open meeting, but if we could do a closed meeting, this board and even the previous board didn't ever get a chance to see that revision that we did of the tool used for Nick's evaluation. And
Yes.
I'm wondering when that will happen so that Nick's not caught by surprise by a new evaluation tool. Including any discussion around.
That has to be an open session, by the way.
Oh, okay, that's fine. And then the other thing was I came away the other night and still not 100% sure that we have set the metrics for the goals that Nick is working on.
He was supposed to get back with some of the time frames to us.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
He was supposed to get back to us for the time frames, for the timelines for each goal that was set.
Yeah, timelines though aren't a metric, that's a to-do list. I'm trying to figure out what we're gonna do to actually measure whether something was done well or not.
We decide on.
Well, it's topic for future, so let me work with my HPC team and bring the metrics they've been creating on some of these and see if that answers the question. And go from there and try to, I wouldn't bring it on the 23rd necessarily, but first meeting in November.
I'm confused as to where HPC comes in.
They help with the strategic plan.
Right.
And so some of the metrics they've designed to measure the progress towards the strategic plan might measure the metrics towards some of the goals, because all the goals align to the strategic plan. Maybe I'm connecting the dots too far out on those, but
I mean, I think that's fairly far out for what we can do to hold you accountable, but I might be thinking of it wrong.
anything else?
Anybody else? Any future topics? Anything else? No. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Any, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Robin, second by Jason. All in favor?
Julie.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7 ayes, 0 nays. Jeff, that was an aye, right?